stay in Hot Springs. As usual, she filled his cup right to the top without looking. When she didn't walk away, he glanced up at her. "Julie?" he asked her directly. She sighed and offered a small smile. "I guess you know me too well, sweetie. I have a favor to ask." "Of course, I'll do anything for my favorite waitress, especially on our last night together. Well, unless you want to run away with me," he joked lightly. When she gave him a hesitant smile instead of the usual playful banter, his mood shifted to concern. "Really, Julie, what can I do for you?" "Don't turn around, but there's a young woman in the last booth who needs your help. She's our daughter's best friend, and I've come to know her over the 3 years she's lived nearby. She's a good girl in a tough spot, and I don't know anyone but you who can help her." Chris's expression turned serious. "What's going on, Julie? This isn't like you, and you know I'm leaving tomorrow for work. I can't stay and help anyone. You'll need to ask someone else." Without answering, Julie waved the young woman over, signaled for her to sit, and then took a seat herself. The girl placed her backpack and a small suitcase on the floor and sat down across from Chris. He looked at her in surprise. She was stunning. Dressed casually in faded jeans and a hoodie, her face was striking. She resembled a movie star. "Chris Alexander, this is Joe Kennedy. Joe, this is Chris Alexander. He's a new friend of mine. Well, he's been a friend since he arrived here over 6 months ago. He's the person in charge of renovating the historic bathhouses along Bathhouse Row, and I happen to know he's a really good guy. Trustworthy and mature," his boss said when he visited the job sites. "Chris, Joe is a star athlete at Hot Springs High School who graduated with high honors. She's a wonderful person, smart, and very mature for her age. She's had to be, because her family situation is quite difficult. She needs your help, and she needs it tonight. I know you're headed to Fort Worth, and Joe needs a ride with you. No, she's not in any legal trouble or something like that, but she really needs to leave this place, and she needs to do it soon. She was going to take a bus, but I asked her to wait and see if you could give her a ride. Listen, Joe just found out she got a scholarship to TCU in Fort Worth, and she needs to get there and prepare for the next semester. There's more to her story, but really it comes down to this. Can you give her a ride tonight?" Chris took a moment to gather his thoughts, his mind racing as he tried to understand enough to make a good decision. He looked at Julie's worried expression, then at Joe, who seemed calm and determined. He asked, "How old are you, Joe?" In a sweet voice, she said, "Today is my birthday. I'm 18. He glanced back at Julie's hopeful face, then turned to Joe, pointing at her backpack and small suitcase. "Is that all you have?" "Yes," she replied simply. With his mind made up, he said, "Joe, I'm on a tight schedule. I plan to drive through the night, crash for a few hours at the company apartment, and head to the office around noon. I can take you to your new place if it's close enough. If not, I'll arrange a taxi." Julie opened her mouth to speak, but Joe quickly said, "That will be fine. Thank you for the ride." Joe picked up her backpack and suitcase. She and Julie hugged for a few seconds before Joe stepped back, waiting for Chris to stand. He put a $20 bill on the table, told Julie he would miss her, and smiled at Joe. "Let's go." Joe followed him outside to his company truck. He opened the back door, placed some boxes in the truck bed, adjusted his things, and set her bags in the clear space. She reached for the door handle, but he opened it for her and motioned for her to get in. Once she was seated, he closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, and started the truck. As they drove away, Joe waved at the restaurant. He saw Julie standing at the door and gave a quick honk as they headed toward Highway 270. Joe stared out the window for a bit, then asked, "How far are we from Fort Worth?" "Probably 5 or 6 hours, depending on how many stops we make," he replied. "That's why I drive at night. During the day, it takes longer because of the traffic." They rode in silence until they left Hot Springs. Chris turned on the XM radio to Willie's Roadhouse just in time to hear Johnny Cash sing "Sunday Morning Coming Down." He tapped his thumbs on the steering wheel and sang along, not caring that Joe was watching him with a smile. He would drop her off in Fort Worth, and after that they would probably never see each other again. So her not appreciating his singing didn't really matter. Waylon and Jesse sang "Storms Never Last," and then Waylon, Willie, and Jerry Jeff took their turn with "Luckenbach, Texas." That made Chris want to sing along. Joe knew the words, so she joined in. Dottie West was singing "A Lesson in Leaving," but he wasn't paying much attention to that. Instead, he turned to Joe and asked, "So, did you grow up in Hot Springs?" She laughed a little. "Not exactly. I went to school there for 3.5 years, but before that, we lived in little towns like Boonville, Bluffton, Sims, Washita, and Mount Ida. Then my mom met a chicken farmer near Pleasant Hill, just south of Hot Springs. My mom had big dreams, but she could never quite leave the Ouachita area." Chris laughed. "So, you're Joe from the Ouachita?" "Don't say it," she replied, though she smiled a little. "Johnny Duncan and Janie Frick," he added. She really liked them. "But you aren't a cowboy. This isn't 98. I'm not a sweet country girl, and this isn't the Bill Mack show, so I guess that's where it ends." "Oh, come on! You've got to see the funny side me stopping for coffee, you hitchhiking, Texas-bound, all snug in your worn jeans." "Well, you aren't the best I've seen, but your plates are from Tennessee, so there's that. Want to stop for some Strawberry Hill?" "I'm only 18. You could get in trouble," she said, pretending to be shocked. "You know we should do this. Ready? I'm not singing a duet with you. Your voice. Come on, just sing with me. It'll make the trip more fun." He beamed until she finally smiled back at him. Then he started singing, "Life can be great on the interstate when you're driving through Arkansas. I won't forget the day I met the girl from the Washita." Joe shook her head until he got to Janie's part. For a moment, she hesitated, then sang in a clear voice. She said, "Thanks for stopping. My name is Joe. You look like a cowboy to me." When she finished, he paused, amazed by how well she sang. She gave him an urging look and waved her finger. He cleared his throat and sang, "I said you're not bad for a country girl, all snug in your worn jeans." She jumped in, singing the chorus loudly. "Wild as a raging river is she. Joe holds my heart in her hand, sweet country girl. I'd give the world just to be your steady man." They finished and laughed together. Joe playfully asked, "So we just met, and I've already got your heart?" "Depends," he replied. "Are you wild as a raging river? Do you even have to ask? Most guys can take one look at me and know exactly what I am." In a playful country tone, he asked, "So is that what moving to Texas is all about?" "Trying to break free from your family and be more independent, huh?" he asked with a playful smile, but she looked away, her expression changing. "I was just joking. Julie mentioned you're a great student and got a scholarship for college. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm sorry." She turned back to him, looking serious. "You should know about this. It might be important later. Honestly, I'm trying to escape my mom's disrespectful boyfriend and his troubling sons. They started bothering me 3 years ago when my body started changing. I talked to my coach, who told the counselor, and they got child and family services involved. A sheriff came to check on things. The counselor warned them that anyone hurting a minor would face serious consequences and become registered offenders. The deputy took them outside and told them my family would call if anything happened to me. If they did not stay away, they could end up in front of a judge. They seemed to take it seriously, but about a month ago, they started reminding me my birthday was coming. I overheard them talking about a party for me that night. They mentioned drinks, drugs, and shady characters. They said they wanted to turn the celebration into something else entirely, and I would be at the center of it. My mom is struggling with drinking and drugs, and she thinks I need to grow up quickly. Her response when I tried to talk to her was that I needed to help out more. Honestly, she's never really protected me. So I began planning my escape, and Julie offered to help me until I get to college, just in case things got too tense before my birthday. She thought you might take me with you to Texas, and here we are." Chris sat still for a moment, focusing on the road. "You are quite a mystery, Joe. You seem like your age, but your life has made you much wiser than you should be. I can't imagine going through what you have and keeping it together like you do, or at least trying to. I have a feeling you will thrive at TCU just like you did at Hot Springs High School. What are you planning to study?" "I want to focus on education, but I'm also interested in psychology and human behavior. I hope to continue with graduate studies in counseling." "Wow! When I was your age, I was just trying to pass my first-year classes. You already have a plan for the next 6 years." She smiled. "I hope it doesn't take that long. I took a lot of advanced classes and have college credit already. I think I have 36 hours, but TCU won't accept 4 of them." He shook his head with a smile. "A mystery wrapped in wisdom. And I guess you think you're very smart too? What's your IQ?" "I've been told I could join Mensa, but I'm not sure about that." "What about you? You studied engineering in Tennessee and managed all those workers fixing the bathhouses. You must be smart too, she said, raising her eyebrows in curiosity. I'm not Mensa material, but I'm not slow either. I actually have a degree in engineering technology management, focusing on construction management. My dad is a contractor, so I grew up on construction sites. So, Mr. Alexander, you keep asking about my age. How old are you? Joe, you were in 5th grade when I was a senior. I'm 25. You see things in a funny way, Mr. Alexander. The difference between 18 and 11 is much bigger than between a mature 18 and a less mature 25, not to mention the difference between 41 and 48. You're not really that much older than me, so don't start acting like my older brother. After she said this, she wrapped her arms around herself, and they sat quietly for a while. He thought about her words and realized she had a point. She was a very mature, independent, and confident 18-year-old, while he felt less so at 25. Sure, he was confident around construction, but in social settings with women his age, he felt shy and unsure. He hadn't always felt this way. He was a star athlete in high school and had even been elected president of the Student Government Association at university in his junior year. He made the dean's list every semester, was part of a popular fraternity, and had many girlfriends before he fell in love and it all went wrong. His sigh caught Joe's eye. Do you want to talk about it? I'm a good listener. He let out a forced chuckle. I think I'll pass. It's something I want to forget. Something or someone? She probed. What's her name? He glanced at her for a moment, paused to think, and then calmly said, Ready for a break? I am, and we're arriving at Texarkana. She agreed, so he stopped at Flying J, refueled, and went inside. On his way to the restroom, he noticed Joe by the pizza display, surrounded by a couple of big truckers who were a bit too close for comfort. She seemed unaware and in control. He walked over, called her name, and when she turned to him said, Don't worry about the pizza. I have grilled subs in the truck. Just grab a drink and I'll be out in a minute. The truckers looked at him like he was taking their young companion away, but he ignored their stares and continued on to the restroom. When he returned, he didn't see Joe. He looked around, got his drink, and walked back to the company truck. She stood beside the truck with 2 truck drivers still talking in her ear. He opened the doors. She climbed out, opened the passenger door, got in, rolled down the window, and said, Thanks for the drink, guys. As much as I appreciate your offers, I'm going to pass this time. Maybe next time, goodbye. The truck drivers glared at him, so he backed out, turned, and drove back to the highway. Your new friends weren't very nice. They didn't even say their names. Oh, that's not true, honey, she replied with a strong southern accent. They were very friendly and sweet, too. They gave me a big drink and offered me $500 each to go with them to their nice trucks. There might even be a bonus if I was really nice to them. And yet you came back to my truck? How could you turn down that offer? He asked, teasingly. I know, right? $1,000 for just a short time. A girl doesn't get offers like that every day. Just imagine how much I could make if I worked the lot all night, like that other girl in the tight clothes. His teasing continued. Probably quite a lot. Do you think smart people invite girls like that? What about the fancy groups at TCU? Well, honey, sometimes a girl has hard choices. Getting treated poorly for 5 minutes for $1,000, or getting back in the truck for another 3 hours with someone who judges me. It's not the easiest decision I've had to make. Her anger was clear, and he was confused by her reaction. Then he thought about what he said and how he said it. Suddenly, he felt embarrassed. I'm sorry, Joe. I have 2 little sisters, one your age, and I'm very protective of them. You remind me of them. She relaxed a bit, though she stayed quiet for a few moments before accepting his apology. It's okay, Chris. I've been on my own for so long that someone caring because I got a soda from some guys annoys me. I hate it when people try to control me, and when they judge me. Well, you saw. Sorry. He smiled softly. I learned something new about you, I guess, but I only wanted to keep you safe. I was worried they took you away when I couldn't find you inside. Her voice became firm again. Don't worry about me with people like that. My high school coach got me into martial arts when I turned 15 and started looking more like a girl. She knew the family I was living with and that I needed to be able to take care of myself. It turns out I'm quite good at it, though my teacher doesn't like how fierce I can get when I'm angry. But believe me, no one gets to use this body without my permission, not even big truck drivers or anyone else. That's not to say I'm completely inexperienced, but I make my own choices about who, when, how, and how much. Is that clear enough for you? I don't need your help. I can take care of myself." He knew he should stay quiet, but she was getting under his skin. "Okay, tough girl. You can handle your own problems." She laughed. "Thanks, but I'm more like a superhero with computer skills. I'm a bit unpredictable, too." "A superhero?" he asked. "You know, like Elizabeth Salander from the Millennium Trilogy. Not familiar? How about the girl with the dragon tattoo?" He shook his head and shrugged. "Kids these days." She laughed and playfully punched him on the shoulder. "You're so out of touch. I guess that explains why you like old country music." "And that explains your attitude, Miss Youngster." She chuckled. "I guess we are from different generations." He took a moment to admire her figure in the dim light from passing cars and thought, what a pity. She was quiet for a bit, and he was deep in his thoughts. This whole night felt strange. From Julie's request to stepping outside his comfort zone to how easily they talked and sang together tonight was unlike anything he had experienced before. Their conversation was unusual. The girl seemed extraordinary. If she had really gone through what she said, and Julie's words seemed to back it up, then if she had faced those challenges and only came out with a tough exterior, she must be really smart. Oh, she showed a few annoying traits too, like asking for drinks from risky people, getting upset about his willingness to help, showing a quick temper and having a sharp tongue, among other things. But she had to be stepping out of her comfort zone as well. Traveling to Texas with someone she barely knew, starting midterm at a pricey private university without any support except scholarships. This couldn't be easy for her either. Speaking of which, now comes the important question. "Joe, I just realized that today is December 18th. The fall semester is finished, and it's at least 3 weeks until spring starts. I doubt anyone will be at the dorm to let you in when we arrive around 4 a.m. Where will you stay?" Without looking at him, she replied quietly, "You can drop me off at a motel. I'll get a dorm room tomorrow." So, whether she was really smart or not, Chris thought, she hadn't thought this through. She doesn't know if anyone will be available during the holidays, and unless she made special arrangements, her scholarships might not even be active until the next semester starts. Since she just found out about the scholarships, it seems likely she hasn't made any prior plans. "My new apartment is just a few miles from TCU. Why spend money on a motel room when I have an extra bedroom available?" It was too dark to see her reaction, but he could sense her hesitation. He quickly added with a light tone, "No pressure, Joe. We both know I'm a bit older, so it's fine. We can relax. I'll head to work around noon. And then in the afternoon, you can get ready for TCU. When I return, I'll take you wherever you need to go." She softly replied, "You don't need to do that. I'm okay." Keeping his playful tone, he said, "What are friends for? Julie asked me to look out for you until you started college. Letting you stay in a room that's already paid for is easy for me. Plus, I'm sure it has a lock, and if you're worried about me, you can just put a chair against it." "Oh, you're not that intimidating, Mr. Alexander. I've dealt with tougher people than you all my life. You have no idea about my mom and her struggles." Her anger and hurt showed just how scared she was. She might be brilliant and attractive, but she was still a young girl far from home. He kept up his calm demeanor. "All right, it's settled then. You'll stay in your own room, get your tasks done while I'm at work, and afterward, I'll take you to the dorm. I might even treat you to brunch since we've been traveling all night." She perked up at the mention of food, making him wonder when she last ate. They were now cruising through Dallas, and they had about 31 minutes left to reach Fort Worth. Following the cheerful voice of the GPS, she guided him to the Clear Fork Apartments, telling him to stay on Interstate 30 for 21 miles and then take the exit onto Chisholm Trail Parkway. They discussed whether to eat and then sleep or vice versa. Joe suggested they eat first, so that's what they decided. Chris took the exit for university and stopped at Southern Pancake and Waffle House. Joe picked the famous German pancakes, which came with butter and powdered sugar. The waiter, who seemed quite taken by Joe, squeezed fresh lemon on her pancakes. After trying a bite, she gave it a thumbs up. Chris felt a bit uneasy looking at all those carbs and sugar, so he focused on his ribeye steak, 3 eggs, grits, and biscuits, enjoying his coffee and milk. Joe quickly finished her meal and started eyeing the leftovers on his plate, so he set down his fork, patted his stomach, and pushed his plate toward her. "I'm finished. Would you like some protein with all those carbs?" She thought for a moment, but decided that her hunger was more important. "Well, I don't usually eat raw meat or runny eggs, but if you don't want this." Even though she typically avoided raw meat and runny eggs, she soaked up the runny eggs with a biscuit, finished the grits, and enjoyed the last pieces of the medium-rare steak without any complaints. She wiped her mouth with her napkin, and Chris took a sip of his coffee, smiling. "Now that was done like a true Southern girl. I'm not sure where you put all that in your tiny body, but all I can say is well done." She beamed, giggled, and then burped before covering her mouth. "Excuse me?" They laughed together, and for the first time since they sang their duets, Chris saw a happy young woman instead of the mix of emotions she had shown him before. The navigation app had to adjust since he had taken a different route, but it guided them onto the parkway, off at the right exit, and helped them find the correct apartment. He knew they had arrived when he saw his truck parked beside his Jeep. He carefully backed into the nearest open space. The company had sent his vehicles from Nashville and left the key to his apartment under the seat of the truck. He grabbed the keys, took his duffel bag and suitcase from the company truck, and Joe followed him to his first-floor apartment with her 2 bags. The first light of morning was just beginning to appear as he opened the door, and they walked into the open kitchen, dining, and living room area. The apartment looked nice with dark wood floors and stylish granite counters. The appliances were shiny metal, and the walls were painted in attractive colors. Chris felt impressed, but a bit disappointed. He had hoped for something more welcoming, like his older place in Hot Springs or his studio in Knoxville. However, they did honor his request for comfortable furniture. He disliked the big, fancy couches and chairs his wealthy friends preferred. Joe was amazed. She stood just inside the door, taking in her surroundings. She seemed a bit overwhelmed, so he said, "Your bedroom is to the left of the living room. It has its own bathroom and closet, and I think there are fresh linens and towels, so make yourself at home. My bedroom is down the hall to the right. If you need me, call me. If not, I'll see you after work this afternoon." She stood still, so he gently nudged her and jokingly said, "Let's check if your room has a lock." She followed him through the kitchen and living room, still amazed by everything around her. He led her to the bedroom door, looked at the handle, and said, "Yes, it does lock. Looks like you'll be safe after all." Then she caught herself and said, "I could handle you, Alexander. Just try me." She pushed past him into the room and closed the door firmly, but not before hearing him say, "I get it. You decide everything. Good night, tough guy." He arrived at the office at 1 o'clock, just in time for a meeting with his boss and several higher-ups. He wasn't expecting so many people and felt a bit nervous sitting at the table with them. They seemed to know a lot about him and appreciated his work on the Bathhouse Row renovations, which he finished on time and under budget. The big boss, Trey Beck, shared their goals and what they hoped for him in his next project. At just 25, with only 3 years at the company, it was surprising to be treated almost like an equal by such important people in a major construction company. While he had spent 10 years learning about construction with his dad's business back in Tennessee, he still felt like a small player mingling with the top management of a Fortune 500 company. After the meeting, they wrapped things up around 3 o'clock. He had gone through an introduction to management practices and learned about the latest technology used in construction. He felt he did well on that part, but he sensed they might have already known the answers to their questions. There were subtle looks exchanged among the managers, making it feel more like a surprise test. He left thinking he had impressed them, but wow, what a first meeting. After the formalities, the tone became more relaxed. Trey Beck invited him to bring a guest to the country club for dinner and dancing on Friday night. Tony Snowden and his wife wouldn't be there since they were going on vacation, but the rest would attend. Their wives would join, but no kids, and the dress code was cocktail. They said their goodbyes, and he headed to his truck. He wanted food and drinks right away. Then, he needed to find a date for Friday night who could fit in with the wealthy crowd at the country club. He knew many suitable young women back in Tennessee, but here, he wasn't sure. He didn't know where to begin. Remembering he needed to take Joe to her dorm, He decided to invite her out for a meal before dropping her off. Joe was happy to see him but seemed a bit shy. She wore jeans and a light blue hoodie with sporty shoes that matched. She looked cute, but there was a worried look on her face. "Is everything okay, Joe?" Sort of," she answered slowly. Then she took a deep breath and said, "The dorms don't open until January 7th, so I found a low-cost motel to stay at until then. You can take me there." He had guessed it. How do I handle this? He thought. She would rather struggle than accept help, so... "I see you have your bags ready. Can we grab a bite to eat before you check in? I'm pretty hungry." "Sure, but I need to check in by 7 or I lose the room," she replied, sounding more confident. "Great. Is it okay to take the Jeep?" "Is that your bright orange Jeep?" she said with a teasing smile. "I thought it belonged to a young college kid." "It belongs to a proud 22-year-old student at the University of Tennessee," he replied. "The color is a bit bold, more like the other UT in Austin, but it was the best I could find back then." She laughed and looked surprised. "You were 22 and thought that was cool? You really are a bit childish, aren't you? Do you want a free meal? Or do you want to keep teasing me?" he asked playfully, pretending to be offended. She chuckled and walked toward the Jeep, stopping to look at it. "Too bright for you? Would you rather take the pickup?" he asked, pointing to his truck parked nearby. "You own that big truck too?" she replied, looking amazed. "Wow, a flashy Jeep, a fancy truck, and a nice place. How wealthy are you, Mr. Geek?" He tilted his head with a grin and replied in a playful accent, "I'm a young professional with comfortable parents, a decent job, and not much to spend my money on since I work long hours and my living expenses are covered when I'm working." "So what if I have 3 vehicles and a big apartment all to myself? I enjoy nice things, I have the means, and I like to treat myself. But if I can get you to hop in one of these, I'll gladly treat you to dinner." "You're not just a geek. You're a rich snob. But I would love to join you for a meal, rich boy. Where are we eating?" He opened the passenger door to the Jeep, let her in, and asked, "How about McDonald's?" Dinner at Papado's Seafood Kitchen was really nice. Joe enjoyed a lot of food and dessert, starting with shared raw oysters, boiled shrimp, and gumbo. They also shared a seafood platter and enjoyed a turtle fudge brownie with pecans and vanilla ice cream. Joe was full of excitement from the moment he politely seated her. She asked many questions about him, captivating him with her bright emerald green eyes, which had been hidden in shadows the night before. By the time she pushed her chair back and looked at the dirty plates on their table with surprise at how much she had eaten, saying, "If I eat another bite, I'll burst," his view of her had changed in a big way. His parents, especially his mother, loved The Princess of Monaco and owned all 11 of her movies. As a boy, he found some of those films dull, often seeing young Grace Kelly with an older man. But by his teenage years, he looked past the stories and other actors to focus on his first crush, Princess Grace. She was so beautiful and elegant, and she became his ideal of beauty. Until tonight. Or maybe it started last night in Hot Springs when Joe sat at his table, but definitely tonight, sitting across from her in bright light. She changed what beautiful meant for Chris. How unfair, he thought, that the first girl who has caught my eye since Becky hurt me is so young, a girl filled with anger and defiance, yet also innocent and incredibly lovely. When the waiter brought their bill, Chris paid quickly. He noticed the staff wanted them to leave as a large group was waiting at the bar. He didn't want to go yet. He knew rejecting her idea of going to the motel would upset her, but he did not want to let her go without a fight. In the Wrangler, he asked, "Where to, Joe?" She quietly read him the address from a note. He entered it into his map app and it gave a route. Joe was silent on the way, but when he turned into a shabby motel in a rough part of town, she thanked him for the meals and his kindness. He stopped the car and she reached for the door, but Chris said firmly, "Wait!" She paused and turned to look at him. He wondered if she felt hope or anger. He hurried to explain. "Joe, I can't let you do this. Julie asked me to look out for you, and it wouldn't be right to leave you here in this unsafe place, not to mention letting you spend money on a little room that could be filled with pests when I have a perfectly good spare room at home." She seemed ready to argue a bit, so he quickly added, "I know you like being independent and not relying on anyone, but how about we make a deal? Let's go to my apartment. You can help me set up my office and make it feel more cozy, and we can also go grocery shopping together. You mentioned you've been cooking for your mom and her boyfriend's family for a while. I'm not a great cook, but I'm okay with grilling and I can make a nice breakfast. I could really use your help while I get my new apartment and job ready. I'll be working from home for the next 2 days to set up my office, review the policy manual, and look over the early plans for my next project. Your help would be great. She seemed unsure, so he added, You could also help me make the place look nicer, maybe add some decorations. If that's not your thing, there is a good gym nearby, as well as nice trails along the river for walking, biking, or running, plus a large common area where you can spend time. You'll be helping me and saving some money for better living. She looked like she was thinking it over, but then her practical side won out over her doubts. Okay, she agreed slowly. But I will work for my room and board. I won't be doing anything else, is that clear? Yes, of course, you get to decide everything. Stop it, she said with a quick smile. I get it, so let's move on. Let's head to my new place. She caught herself and quickly adjusted. I mean, let's go to your plain new apartment and see if we can make it less cold and uninviting. But first, we really need to go grocery shopping. There's nothing to eat or drink in that big kitchen. And we don't have pots, pans, or plates either, do we? He asked. She shook her head, so he used Apple Maps to find the nearest Costco or Sam's Club. Costco was closer, and he had a membership, so it was an easy drive. The kitchen items Chris had in storage were old from college and in bad shape. He had hoped to include them in the high rent, but since that didn't happen, he decided to buy new things a young professional should have for entertaining. They started with kitchen tools and then picked out tableware and dining supplies. She had a good eye, read the labels carefully, and chose items that matched or looked nice together. Soon, their apartment filled up with boxes, so she went to get a cart for grocery shopping. Buying in bulk at Costco was more than what a single guy needed, even with a roommate who loved food. They decided to get essential items there and shop for the rest at a regular grocery store. This choice took them to a nearby town called Burleson, which had an H-E-B grocery store. Chris's friends at Hot Springs were from South Texas and often talked about how great H-E-B was, comparing it to local stores. He was eager to drive a bit to check it out. It had everything they promised, a wide variety of items and good prices. With no budget limit, Joe quickly filled the cart with healthy foods and tasty, ready-to-make meals from the store. They also picked up bags for the milk, fresh orange juice, and refrigerated and frozen goods, then loaded everything into their Jeep. On a different route home, they drove past new neighborhoods where two-story houses stood close together with narrow gaps between them. He mentioned he wouldn't want to live in a place like that, and she quizzically looked at him but agreed. As they moved north on Hewlin Street, they passed a large mall with Dillard's and Macy's as the main stores. Noticing how few clothes Joe had with her, he made a note to address it later. He hoped she wouldn't show up at TCU looking unkempt. A young woman like Joe would feel embarrassed if teased about her clothes. She chatted cheerfully about things they needed for their place while he listened to her lovely voice. He considered her ideas but only spoke when she asked. He hadn't really explored the apartment yet. He hadn't even seen the bedroom he intended to use as an office. Joe had spent all day there. What could he tell her? When they arrived at the apartment, Joe quickly grabbed her backpack, suitcase, and some food bags and raced to the door. He picked up more food bags, feeling frustrated when he realized he would have to set some down just to get his key and open the door, only to find it already open. "Did we leave it unlocked?" he asked, as he placed the bags on the counter. "Oh no, I used your spare key to look around today and forgot to put it back," she said casually. "So I let us in." For the next 20 minutes, Chris carried in the groceries while Joe organized everything. Once all the items were inside, he helped finish putting things away according to her system. By 9:30, the kitchen looked as tidy as his mother's, which was impressive. Joe placed her hands on her hips, looked around, and asked, "Well, what do you think?" "It looks great. Your organization really makes sense to me, and I think I'll be able to find things, thank you." Joe gave him a thoughtful look, tilted her head, and said, "What do you say to a mug of hot chocolate before we head to bed?" Even though he was tired, he thought that sounded wonderful. He took out the milk, she added the chocolate, heated it in the microwave for a bit, and sprinkled some tiny marshmallows on top. He sat on a bar stool, she on another, and they enjoyed their warm drinks in a comfortable silence. Joe was seated across from him, gazing out the window by the sink. She seemed lost in the lights outside, so Chris took a moment to look at her. The lights reflected off her hair, giving her a warm glow. Deep in thought, she sipped her hot chocolate and stared out while he admired her. Her soft features sat above a slender neck and well-shaped shoulders. The loose hoodie she wore kept things modest, but he could see hints of her figure. Her fitted jeans highlighted her flat stomach and well-shaped legs, leading down to small ankles and feet. Even her toes, which he usually wouldn't pay much attention to, looked perfectly arranged, painted a light blue with sparkly silver. The best word he could think of to describe her was adorable, but it didn't quite capture her whole beauty. He found himself wanting to see her face turned toward him, with a perfect outline around it, sure that it would suit her just as well as those famous figures from the past. Maybe he gazed a bit too long or held his breath, but Joe came back to the moment, looked at him, and asked seriously, "Why are you looking at me like that, Chris?" He wanted to be honest, but worried how she might react, so he gave her a big smile and teased, "You're not too bad for a country girl in those jeans." "Are you flirting with me, Mr. Alexander?" she said playfully, placing a hand over her heart in a dramatic gesture. He laughed. "No, Miss Kennedy, just sharing my thoughts." They went to bed soon after Joe called him out on his teasing, and both fell into a deep sleep that brought on dreams. His dreams were unclear and jumbled when he tried to think about them the next morning. Lying there, he thought about the mixed feelings he had for the young woman who had unexpectedly taken over his thoughts. The wish to care for her was still strong, just like that important night, but his feelings for her had grown deeper. Lying in bed thinking about her wasn't helping, so he got up at 6:30. He started making coffee and moving around the kitchen, opening and closing cabinets to find what he needed for breakfast. She walked into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. Her hair was messy, and she wore a big white football jersey with black and gold numbers, along with white socks. She looked really cute. "Why are you up so early making noise? I thought you didn't work today," she asked sleepily. "It's almost 7. I never said I didn't have to work. I'm just setting up my office here." "Sorry for the noise. I didn't think you'd hear me through the closed door. I had to search for the pans I needed." "Stop being so cheerful and give me some coffee," she said with a slight pout. "Not a morning person, huh?" She nodded in agreement, her expression showing a mix of annoyance and tiredness. He handed her a cup of coffee, some sugar, and a bottle of flavoring she bought last night. "Need anything else for your coffee?" "You tease me at your own risk before I have my coffee," she mumbled before taking a sip. Chris turned back to breakfast and asked, "I'm making scrambled eggs, sausage, grits, and biscuits. Do you want some?" She definitely did. 2 of each. He shook his head at how much she could eat and still stay so slim. It was another mystery about her. As she ate, she praised the breakfast, her enjoyment clear from the happy sounds she made with each bite. He loved listening to her even more than eating his own meal, and the food was good. She helped clean up the kitchen, chatting excitedly about the meal, the new tableware, and how well they organized everything. He noted that giving her coffee and food first was the way to go for easier conversations. He could have sat there all morning, enjoying her cheerful voice, but she was ready to work on his new office, which was actually the smallest bedroom. A dresser and a bed took up most of the space, so Chris moved the dresser into the closet and the bed into a corner of the room. This opened up more space for his office. He took out his office chair and glass-top desk from storage, and they worked together to set them up in the newly cleared area. She teased him about the jumble of cords and chargers he had for his personal laptop, work laptop, printer, iPad, iPhone, and company phone. He added a wireless keyboard and mouse, set up the Wi-Fi, and connected the Bluetooth speakers. The computer desk and table were messy, but in a tidy way. She shook her head at him. "Do you really need all these gadgets?" "Hey, my phone is really old and ready for an upgrade, and my iPad is a generation behind. Sure, my laptop is new, but I got a great deal on it during a sale." She pulled an old iPhone from her pocket and held it up. "Yours is a XS, mine is a 6S, but it still works great." He laughed, but then turned serious and asked, "Do you have a laptop for school?" She looked away. "No, but I think the school has some. My other Dell is tucked away in the closet. I bought it last year and it was really good then. I moved everything off it and backed it up. If you think you can use it, we could update it and set it up for school. What do you think? Chris, you're too kind. I can't keep accepting your help. I'm not someone you need to take care of all the time. Joe, I have a perfectly good laptop sitting there and I don't need it. I could recycle it, but I'd rather give it to someone who can use it. No strings attached. She sighed, put on a smile, and said, Thank you, kind sir. I can definitely use that. I guess it's kind of like recycling. He took it out, charged it, tested it, looked up the details, and ordered a bigger memory card. Without any fuss, he added another computer to his Office 365 subscription and cleared a spot for her laptop on the table. Looks like we need another chair, he said. She laughed, picked up the laptop, sat cross-legged on the bed, set it on her lap, and started downloading the programs and apps she needed. He opened his work laptop and began reviewing specs for his upcoming tasks. They drank water and worked on their computers for hours. Oh, sorry, Joe said with a giggle after her stomach growled. Wow, it's past 2 p.m., Chris exclaimed. Time flies when you're busy. Do you want to cook something or eat out? It's such a nice day. How about we grill one of the sirloins and some veggies? I can make a salad and tea and we can eat here, Joe suggested. He liked her idea, so he went outside to start a fire in the charcoal grill on the deck. He seasoned the meat while Joe prepared the squash and corn and made the salad. They worked together really well while she told him about the things she had been downloading and doing on her computer. He cut the sirloin steak in half because she wanted hers cooked thoroughly while he prepared his medium rare. She enjoyed her meal and pleasantly commented on how good it was. He found himself liking the little sounds she made when she was happy, but quickly thought, No, don't go there. She's not just someone to flirt with. Then he realized that she would soon be the type of girl that many guys would notice, and that thought made him frown. After finishing their meal, they decided it was time for a workout, so they changed into shorts and to shirts. Chris felt a rush of surprise when he saw her in her workout clothes. She looked fantastic, especially her legs. They looked great in jeans, but even better now. What he could see under her hoodie didn't do her justice. He didn't know her size, but in her tank top, she looked just right for her shape. He knew he was staring at her, but she didn't seem to mind. In fact, she subtly showed off a little, watching to see how he reacted. She might be young, but she certainly knew how to put herself out there. To avoid embarrassing himself, he quickly looked away. They went for a jog around the apartment complex to warm up, then stretched, lifted weights, and went for a longer run on a nearby trail along the clear fork of the Trinity River. Whenever they passed other joggers or walkers, he purposely fell behind to let them through, but really, he just wanted a moment to admire her fit and curvy figure. After their run, they jogged slowly around the complex to cool down and check out the amenities. It was after 5, and as people were coming home from work, they noticed the attention they were getting. Joe waved and smiled at those they passed, which got them to return the gestures. Just a small-town girl, he thought to himself. At the clubhouse, they saw a poster for a hump day mixer happening that evening. Chris asked her, Are you interested? She smiled and said it could be fun. They should head home and freshen up. He noted her use of the word home and smiled to himself. A little later, she came out of her bedroom in a colorful dress that took his breath away. He was dressed in boots, jeans, and a polo shirt, expecting her to wear something similar. Instead, he found himself with an elegant young woman. She beamed at his surprised expression and asked, So, do I look okay? Yes, you look much better than okay. Shall we go? He thought about getting his gun for safety, but chose to rely on his strength when the stairs turned into an unwanted chase. Dressed in faded jeans and a hoodie earlier, she seemed a lot younger now in her dress and short black boots. She would certainly attract a lot of attention. When they entered, the noise in the clubhouse didn't completely stop, but it did quiet down a bit while they got their name tags. At least 3/4 of the eyes turned to watch them. They made their way to the open bar. Chris ordered a bourbon on the rocks for himself and, as they had talked about, a Rob Roy mocktail for Joe. They headed toward the fireplace, but a group soon stopped them, and introductions began. The group grew larger, and as more people joined in, the space between Chris and Joe widened. This made him a bit anxious, but Jo kept sipping her drink and seemed to handle the conversations well, so he relaxed and chatted with the many new acquaintances around him. Suddenly, a small hand grabbed his arm, and a soft touch brushed against him. With a gentle pull, she said, "Could you please get me another drink? That one was great." He noticed the endearment and looked down at her bright smile, returning the smile as he agreed to get them both another drink. He guided her toward the bar, noticing how many eyes were on them. "Are you getting as much attention as I am?" she asked softly, flashing him a bright smile. Chris chuckled and smiled back. "I don't think so. You look especially stunning tonight. I bet every man here has taken a good look at you, and some seem determined to come closer. Every time I looked up, there were more people surrounding you." "These 20 and 30-year-olds are a lot bolder than the teens I usually see," she replied with a grin. "Except for you, of course. You're such a perfect gentleman." He sighed internally, knowing his thoughts weren't as noble. "You seem to be handling it all well. Are any of them standing out, or just the crowd in general?" She laughed. "The tall blonde in the fancy jacket, the flashy man in a cowboy outfit, the muscular one in the tight shirt, and the tall woman with dark hair are probably the worst. Do you mind if I stick by your side for the rest of the night? I don't feel comfortable with them. I've heard about things like date rape drugs, and they kept trying to buy me drinks." Chris felt a sense of alarm at her words, but kept his calm exterior. "I doubt anything bad would happen while you're with me, but it's smart to be careful. You know the rules. Don't leave your drink unattended, and don't take a drink from someone you don't know. If someone asks you to dance, make sure a trusted friend watches your drink while you're away." "Oh, I know all the rules. They taught us these things in school. This is just the first time I really understood why. School dances aren't the safest places." For the rest of the night, they acted like a couple. As they talked with others, Chris appreciated how easily Jo connected with people much older than herself. Her smarts and humor made her age seem unimportant. They chatted with a variety of people at the upscale apartment complex in Fort Worth, Texas. Chris learned that Jo was confident, charming, and had a great sense of timing in her laughter and comments. In fact, she was the best companion he had brought to an event like this, even better than Becky or the sorority president from his sophomore year. That thought kept coming back to him as they mingled. When they finished with their group and went to get drinks, an older couple they didn't know approached and introduced themselves. Even though the invitation said casual, Carla wore a fancy casual dress and stylish leather boots. Ken had on a nice watch, blue blazer, and gray slacks. It was clear they wanted to impress the younger crowd, and they quickly made it known that they were wealthy. They had recently sold their big house and moved to this penthouse apartment, planning to travel the world. "We are curious people," Carla said. "We want to take a break from our busy lives and explore new experiences with new friends." Carla touched Chris's arm but looked at Jo. "Our children are away at school, and we won't be traveling until mid-January. We may be older, but we feel young at heart, and we're open to new adventures. We would love to spend time with you two. When can we meet?" Chris was trying to think of a polite way to say no when Jo excitedly replied, "Oh, that sounds like so much fun. You two look so stylish and elegant. I'm sure we could learn a lot from you. We're a bit busy until after the 1st. Can we check back with you then?" Carla seemed disappointed, but Ken was intently looking at Jo. He responded, "As my lovely wife mentioned, we would love to have you over any time. We look forward to your call after the 1st. Jo playfully looked at Ken, touched his shoulder, and said, "Oh, you'll definitely hear from us. We can't wait." Then she turned to Chris and said, "I need to go to the restroom. Could you please get me a fresh drink and meet me by the bar?" "Nice to meet you, Carla and Ken." Chris was both amused and curious about how well she handled what could have been an awkward moment. How did she think of that so quickly and deal with it so calmly? He admired her quick thinking. Then an idea struck him. Could she be the person to take to the country club, to meet his bosses and their wives? It seemed silly given her age and background, but she was fitting in well with the different people tonight. She managed a small problem while he, the more experienced one, stood there unsure. With that thought, he decided to see how she would do in different conversations. They talked about world events, where she surprised him with her knowledge, sports, and local politics, which neither of them knew much about. She handled that topic nicely by explaining she had just moved here and asked others for their thoughts on candidates and issues. As the 2 hours went on, he noticed she had a special talent for getting people to talk. Her interest in what others had to say made them open up more. She was impressively calm and aware for someone her age. Back at the apartment, he praised her for how well she managed conversations and offered her hot cocoa with marshmallows. They sat on the couch, positioned to talk face to face. "Joe, 3 of my bosses asked me to bring a guest to the country club Friday night for dinner. Would you like to come?" She didn't look away. In fact, she gazed into his eyes. "Are you sure? That seems a bit beyond what I'm used to, and I wouldn't want to make you uncomfortable." "That's not a worry for me. After seeing how you connect with people tonight, I'm confident you'll impress them just as much. You interacted with many different people easily, and you seem comfortable talking with older folks, which they are. I'm sure you'll do great and have fun. So, if I'm not a concern, does that mean you'll come?" "Chris, I don't really have anything to wear for an occasion like that." "Maybe you should consider Claire, that pretty brunette we met tonight. She's single and wealthy, so I bet she knows the country club well." "I want you to come, Joe, not her. We passed a mall with stores like Dillard's and Macy's earlier. I'm sure we can find something nice for you. I'll buy your dress and even treat you to a visit to a salon if you agree to join me. You'd really be helping me out." He was captivated by her smile and excited when she nodded her head in agreement. It was a small step, but it felt good, moving away from the feelings of resentment and mistrust that had held her back. They left for the mall at 10 so they could arrive when the stores opened. The sales lady at Dillard's was happy to help Joe. "You're a perfect size 4 in ladies' clothes and a size 5 in juniors. You look great in everything you try on. We usually help girls who wish they were smaller, so it's nice to help someone like you." There were many options available in those sizes, almost too many. After trying on several party dresses, Joe came out wearing a little black dress and 4-inch black heels. The dress had a simple square neckline, no sleeves, and wide straps. It ended just above her knees, and she held a small jacket casually over her arm. While it was not revealing, the dress looked very nice on her in a classy way. The expression on his face said a lot. "I told you, honey," the sales lady said with a smile. "It's perfect for you. Just look at him, he's speechless. Older men will admire your style and their wives will notice too." They walked away laughing, happy with her choice. A few moments later, they called him to the front so he could pay for the little black dress and the black sweater dress with red and white trim and buttons that he was eager to buy. She had tried it on earlier, and at his request, she modeled it again, asking if she should get it too. He nodded. The smiles on Joe and the sales ladies' faces showed that they could tell he liked the sweater dress and the knee-high boots, and they were enjoying teasing him with it. The 2 dresses and boots she had chosen were all on sale for the holidays, and he was glad that they cost less than the other dresses in the store, but looked even better. The sales lady gave Joe her card and told Chris it was a pleasure to assist them, encouraging them to come back any time. The mall was getting busy, and Joe was ready to head out. He suggested they check out Macy's sale for some casual outfits she could wear to class or at social events. She looked at him, but saw only genuine care in his eyes. Enjoying the shopping and his reactions, she smiled and said, "Okay, if you want to treat me, I'm all for it." But there was a challenge. There were so many great choices, and she looked fantastic in each one. He would have gladly bought her all 18 outfits she tried on. She told him that if he wouldn't choose, she would. Since he couldn't decide, she picked 5 outfits that got the most reactions from him and the crowd watching her model. She also got a comfy jumpsuit she liked. They carried the things they bought to Chick-fil-A, enjoyed some sandwiches, and then went back to the apartment. Joe went into her room and he could hear her moving around. "So, am I going to get a fashion show now?" he asked with a smile. She popped her head out and asked, "Really?" "Of course, but this time I want a proper runway show." She let out a big grin and said, "Take a seat on the couch." She started with the casual jumpsuit, then showed off 2 sets of tailored pants and blouses, a pair of blue jeans with a stylish top, and finally surprised him with a red dress he hadn't seen before. "You just saw the little black dress, so this is my last one," she said, returning in a cozy sweater dress. As she walked around and wore the clothes, he held a throw pillow in his lap the whole time. The last two dresses changed everything for him. To make things more interesting, she played a DVD called Ballroom Dances. "These are the kinds of dances we might see at the country club, right?" He nodded in agreement. She took his hands in hers and said, "Since we've never danced, we need to practice so we won't feel embarrassed." He tried to calm himself, but he couldn't help feeling nervous while they learned the proper way to dance a waltz. She seemed to focus on the steps and guided him, which helped him relax. Chris's family had taught him ballroom dancing, as was expected in their social circle. It surprised him that Jo, a girl from a quiet area, was even better at it than he was. "The same coach who got me into martial arts also introduced me to a class called ballroom dancing. I found out I was pretty good at that too," Jo explained, as if she read his mind. They took turns dancing waltzes, polkas, two-steps, foxtrots, and even the tango. She was light on her feet, anticipating his every move, making them dance like they had practiced together for years. It was just early afternoon when the music stopped and they congratulated each other. She went to change, but before entering her room, she turned back and asked, "Want to go for a run along the river? I think we could both use some exercise, and you seem to enjoy the views along the trail." He felt she knew the view he appreciated the most, and the top and shorts she put on looked good. The sales tag was still on the shorts, but he didn't say anything. He was happy to pay for something that looked this nice on her. It was a bit chilly for her running outfit, but the only change he noticed was that the top fit snugly. They ran side by side until they came across other people on the trail, then he would drop back and run behind her. When he caught up again, he saw her playful smile, and he knew she was aware of his attention. At that moment, he didn't mind. Yes, she was younger than him. No, he wasn't going to pursue someone under his care. Putting those thoughts aside, she was everything he found attractive, at least in looks. The tension and mood swings she had before seemed to have faded since they moved into the apartment. He fell behind to let a bicyclist pass, and she caught him looking when she glanced back. She smiled and gracefully continued running ahead. If she didn't mind his admiration, he intended to appreciate her while he could. They stayed in that night. They watched a movie, ate popcorn, and drank hot chocolate. She wore her favorite shirt, which displayed her lovely legs. They started with Jo sitting at one end of the couch, but sharing the popcorn meant passing it back and forth, so she moved to the middle and held the bag with her feet on the coffee table. Each time he reached for popcorn, his thoughts wandered. After the movie, he took a long shower to relax. Jo settled down for a quiet evening in her room. Jack had learned how to make breakfast tacos from his Texan roommate, so he made egg and bacon tacos with cheese and salsa for them. They shared a pot of coffee before diving into their projects. For lunch, Jo made a club sandwich, after which she planned to do her nails. He returned to his office to check emails from friends and work. The only message was instructions for entering the country club as their guest. When he came back out, Jo was on the couch with her feet on the coffee table, carefully painting her toenails. He paused to watch. Painting nails had never caught his interest before, but Jo made it seem special. She was so focused and her feet rested on the table, showing off her lovely legs. She looked charming. He stood watching until she noticed him. "Never seen a girl painting her toenails?" she joked. "Not like you do," he said, clearing his throat. "Oh, I got a message from my boss to be at the community center by 6:45 with some instructions. You can be ready by then, right?" She was ready, stepping out of her bedroom at 6:20 in a little black dress, black tights, and high heels. She caught his surprised gaze and twirled, asking, "How do I look?" "Not bad for a country girl," he said modestly, thinking she seemed more like a city girl. She smiled brightly, asked him to help her with her jacket, and they headed to the truck. He mentioned that getting in and out of the truck in that dress without being too revealing would be tricky, but he thought the step bar on the truck would help. "Thank you for thinking of my modesty, kind sir. I haven't been in your nice truck before, so let's see how this works. Oops, sorry about that." He turned red and quickly got back to the driver's side, trying to focus on the road instead of her lovely legs peeking out from the dress. "So, what should we say our story is?" she asked. "Should we tell them the truth, or is that too awkward? Do you have another story you like better?" "I don't want them to think poorly of either of us," Chris said. I doubt they'll believe we're just friends, but I don't like lying either. What do you think?" "The truth. It's too hard to keep up with lies," she replied firmly. The valet was more than happy to help Joe out of the tall pickup truck and was rewarded for his service. She thanked him sweetly, leaving him momentarily speechless, and he stammered, "My pleasure, ma'am." Chris thought this was quite a compliment, considering the number of women the valet probably assisted each night. He walked to her, offered his arm, and led her through the front door. The host took their information and guided them to their table. His confident date clung to his arm, which tested his calm. There were many ways this could go wrong. Neither of them had to worry. The guests waiting for them were impressed by Chris's dark suit and amazed by Joe in her little black dress. This was the world Chris grew up in, so by the time everyone was introduced, he felt comfortable, even though they were his bosses and their spouses. Joe, given her age and background, had every reason to feel nervous. In fact, she should have felt out of place, but she didn't show it. Chris knew her well enough to notice the slight tension in her smile, but no one else did. She greeted everyone confidently and accepted handshakes and friendly gestures gracefully. She repeated each name after introductions to help remember them. Joe seemed calm, sure of herself, and relaxed. Sandra Beck turned to Chris, tilted her head, and said, "I see you don't remember me, but you were much shorter the last time I saw you. I bet you remember your mom receiving calls from Sandy on her birthday, right?" Chris looked surprised. "You're Sandy Hardy Beck, her sorority sister? Of course, I didn't connect the dots, but now it makes sense. You always sent us birthday cards and gifts. It's wonderful to see you again." She smiled brightly, and Chris turned to Trey. "Why didn't you tell me? I knew you and my dad were friends, but I thought it was just because of your work in construction. When I got the suggestion from HR to hire you, I called your dad. He said you were determined to succeed on your own, so he told me to keep you in the dark and see how you did. So if you're wondering about all the tough jobs in your first year, you can thank your dad." He laughed and added, "So far it looks like you're doing great, and I know everyone here agrees, even your teams, and they're usually tough on their bosses." Sandra reached out and gently touched his hand. "We're sorry for the surprise, dear, but we promised your mom and dad." Chris laughed loudly and replied, "All I can say is, it's a small world. This is a lovely surprise." By now, all the elders had drinks, so Trey signaled the waiter to take their order. Chris asked for his favorite bourbon on the rocks, and Joe chose a new favorite mocktail. Rob Roy with Coke instead of scotch, plus a little seltzer. This drew curious looks from the other ladies, but they didn't comment. Instead, they began to ask Chris and Joe a lot of questions. "So, you two make such a beautiful couple," Sandra Beck said excitedly. "How do you know each other?" Chris and Joe shared a chuckle and exchanged glances. Good thing they were ready for this. Joe said, "You should tell them." With a big smile, Chris started a simple version of their story. Chris was working in Hot Springs to help fix Bathhouse Row. Joe had finished high school early. She was living with a friend who introduced her to Chris. She needed a ride to TCU, and Chris offered to drive her. During the trip, they became friends. Chris noticed the frowns on the faces of the three men, so he quickly explained that Joe was 18 and had left a hard family situation behind. He assured everyone that their friendship was completely appropriate. While his explanation was honest, he knew it didn't give the full picture, and he expected the women would want to know more, which they did. Rebecca Elliott, the wife of Chris's boss, asked where Joe was staying. Joe explained that she was Chris's guest, using an extra bedroom until the dorms opened. In return, she was helping out with meals and cleaning. This made the women laugh and piqued the interest of the men, but Sue Schneider, wife of the COO, shifted the topic. "Joe, when you walked in, I thought you and Chris were the same age. Not that you look old, it's just that both of you seem so confident. How is it that someone your age carries themselves so well?" Joe glanced at Chris, who shrugged. It was up to her to share her story, and if she chose not to, he would support her. "I could tell you a lie to make Chris look better for having me here, but I won't. We promised to be honest," Joe said firmly, her voice steady. "My mother says my last name is Kennedy, but I have never met my father, so I can't be sure. Maybe it's just a name she picked during one of her rough times. Yes, I'm the only child of a mother who struggled with addiction. For the past 3 years, we lived with one of her partners who had 3 sons. From day one, they made it clear they weren't happy I was there. Thankfully, a caseworker and a sheriff's deputy kept me safe because I was still a minor. Last week, on my 18th birthday, I learned they had planned a coming-out party for me since I would no longer be a minor. That's why I graduated early and why I asked Chris for a ride to Fort Worth, where I have a scholarship to attend TCU next semester. Jo spoke confidently, maintaining her gaze throughout her explanation. No, she looked each person in the room in the eyes as she shared her difficult story, speaking calmly with very little emotion. Chris was moved but listened supportively, keeping his feelings in check. The other 6 adults, however, showed the wide range of feelings Chris had experienced in the truck when he first heard her story. At that moment, the 3 men were sitting up straight in their chairs, their eyes full of anger about the unfairness. Throughout her story, she changed from being Chris's girlfriend to someone who needed caring protection. The 3 women leaned forward, wanting to reach out to her, to offer comfort and support, just like they would to a daughter. I want to thank my high school coach, the school counselor, and my teachers for encouraging me to join sports and activities like theater and debate. They helped me build my skills and taught me to face challenges instead of running away. Hot Springs High School was like a village that guided me during my tough teenage years. I also owe thanks to my mother. Her indifference and the example she set helped me grow up faster than many of my friends. It's not a happy story, but it's mine, and I hope it makes me who I am today. Jo took a deep breath, trying to move past the emotions around her, avoiding Chris's gaze. You might think I'm trying to repay him in some way, but I promise Chris is way too much of a gentleman to accept anything like that. In my life, I've dealt with many men like my mother, and boys who only cared about their own interests. Christian Brady is the only man, besides Deputy Schillings, with whom I've truly felt safe. He's also the only one, apart from my teachers, who seems to care about my future. I left home with just one nice dress, some jeans, shorts, hoodies, and 2 pairs of shoes. He bought me this dress and shoes so I could be here tonight, as well as 6 other nice outfits to help me feel prepared when I start school. By bringing me here tonight to meet all of you, knowing this is a new and scary experience for me, he showed that he believes in me. She looked down for a moment, then back up, seeing sadness on everyone's faces. I can tell my story has upset you, and I'm sorry for that. Maybe I should have kept quiet. I didn't mean to spoil our special evening. Chris told me to be honest if asked, so that's what I did. I apologize if I upset anyone, and I hope we can talk about nicer things now. Chris cut through the awkwardness. Jo didn't mention everything about her life. She's an award-winning athlete in 3 sports, a talented actress who sings beautifully, graduated at the top of her class, and is even qualified for Mensa. In just 2 months, she created a resume and applied for admission and financial aid at several universities. They all accepted her, but TCU was especially confident in her, offering her a full scholarship for the spring semester at this expensive private school. To me, that's what matters. She is who she is. She hasn't let a hard life hold her back. She has used her many skills and talents to rise above that and take advantage of opportunities. You know my parents, so you understand that I never face the same kind of challenges. I can help her move forward, and I'm excited to support her because I know she will make me proud and all her supporters proud too. As Chris spoke, he had a cheerful look, like he was talking about a younger sibling or friend. When he added that he knew Jo would make him proud, his glance and smile were full of emotion that everyone noticed, and Jo felt deeply. For the first time, Jo's eyes filled with tears, and her lips trembled a bit, prompting the 3 women to quickly take her to the restroom. The 3 men shared knowing looks, but no one said anything until Trey suggested they have another round of drinks. Chris tried to hide his embarrassment for showing his feelings when he wanted to focus on celebrating Jo and not on things she couldn't control. Little did he know, he had done so much more. When the women returned, the men had stopped talking about the Cowboys' failed season and were discussing the underdog Longhorns against the Georgia Bulldogs in the Sugar Bowl on January 1st, and the Horned Frogs' chances against the California Bears in the Cheez-It Bowl on December 26th. They stood up courteously as the women approached, all smiling and chatting happily, with Jo walking between Sandra and Rebecca. Jo looked a little shyly at Chris as she sat down, but he greeted her with a warm and friendly smile. Their waiter came over with a menu, and they looked it over before making their choices. At Sandra's suggestion, Joe ordered the chicken piccata with lemon sauce and capers, and the other women followed suit, while the men chose prime rib. Trey asked if anyone wanted another drink before the meal, and everyone said yes. Before Joe ordered, Sandra leaned in and said, "Sweetie, there's a tasty mixed drink we let our daughters have when they were your age. It's called a bocce ball, and you'd need to drink quite a few to feel its effects. Would you like to try one?" Joe glanced at her friend and said yes. "And a bocce ball, but make it with club soda instead of vodka for this young lady," Sandra ordered. A bocce ball turned out to be a mix of orange juice, a splash of amaretto, and club soda. Joe enjoyed it and thanked Sandra. They probably shouldn't have served it to her, but she accepted it anyway. During dinner, Joe led the conversation, keeping it cheerful and light. She wanted to hear about everyone's families. Each couple shared their stories, and Joe listened attentively. She loved hearing about the joy their children and grandchildren brought them and asked them to share more. She wanted to know all the details about what made their families unique. The proud parents and grandparents happily shared stories, making their descriptions even richer. Chris was also interested in their family stories. He learned things that would help him be a better worker and friend, feeding his natural curiosity. But what impressed him most was Joe's talent for making people open up and share their stories, showing her genuine interest in even the small details. He admired how well she handled the more challenging moments of the evening, and wondered about her ability to bounce back so swiftly. Was it her charm at work, or did she have hidden skills? When the delicious meal arrived, the talk slowed down, allowing him to reflect on what he'd observed. Joe remained a mystery to him. After dinner, while they enjoyed another drink before the orchestra started, Sue Schneider asked about Christmas plans. Joe looked at Chris in surprise, as if she just realized it was December 22nd. "Well," Sandra asked, "what are your plans, Chris and Joe?" Chris glanced at Joe and then the others. "I wasn't sure how much time I would have off because of a new project, so we made plans back at Thanksgiving. My parents and siblings are driving down tomorrow in Dad's motorhome. They should arrive early on Christmas Eve. We're celebrating Christmas in my apartment, so I need to get a tree and some decorations in the morning. Like Joe says, my place doesn't feel very homey, but I hope she will help me make it welcoming." "Your parents are coming?" Joe asked in shock. "Why didn't you tell me? I don't want to mess up your family gathering. I can find a room somewhere." "Ha ha!" Sandra jumped in, wagging her finger at Joe. "If you do that, his family will come looking for you and bring you back." I spoke with Deborah on the phone right before we left, and she was really excited to meet the first girl Chris has mentioned since his engagement ended badly. Joe still looked worried, but Trey said, "Joe, they are the kindest people, and they will love you. Just relax and be yourself. You'll impress them just like you have everyone at this table tonight." As luck would have it, the orchestra began to play, and everyone got up to dance. "When were you going to tell me about this?" she asked, a bit upset as they danced smoothly together. "In the morning when we were going to get decorations. I thought you might react this way, but my family really wants to meet you. No pressure, Joe. They are truly nice people, and my little sisters promise they will be your best friends by Christmas." "What will they think of me, Chris? That I'm just after your money?" "Joe, that's not it at all. We have always welcomed students who couldn't go home during the holidays. It's just being friendly. The same goes for friends needing a place to stay. We Southerners believe in hospitality. It's not a big deal. They know you are staying in my spare room, and they don't mind at all. Please don't start doubting our friendship now." What did she mean by the first girl he's mentioned since his breakup? Have you talked to them about me? Of course. I talk to at least one of them every few days. I even sent them a picture of us at the mixer because they were curious about my new roommate. I see that look, but I'm being honest. My sisters think you look very nice, and they can't wait to be your friends. Mom and Dad just want to meet you. They even got you a gift, so we'll need to find something for them from you tomorrow. No, we won't. I have some money saved, and I'm going to buy gifts for your family and my roommate. You've already been so generous. Okay, we'll shop as soon as the stores open. I'll show you some pictures of my family and what I already got for them. You can ask all the questions you want, and I might have a few ideas too. But as for me, just being my guest tonight and charming my bosses and their wives is the best gift you could give me. She tilted her head and asked playfully, "Is it really? The best gift I could give you, I mean?" She smiled, and he turned a bit red but quickly responded, "Are you flirting with me, Lady Joe?" She giggled and pretended to be shy, but the smile stayed. After the dance, they returned to a table of laughing adults. "So, Joe, what did you say to your roommate to make him blush like that?" Sandra asked while taking a sip of her drink. "Oh, I was just having a little fun," Joe replied. "He's easily embarrassed about some things," she said with a smile. Chris looked down at his drink, trying to avoid eye contact. He turned even redder when everyone laughed at Joe's response. When the music started again, everyone moved to the dance floor. He felt fine dancing to the waltzes, foxtrots, and two-steps, keeping his distance while admiring her graceful moves. Then they played a tango, and watching her dance nearly overwhelmed him. She moved with such skill, and every time they separated, her hands would lightly touch his arms. It was hard not to get caught up in the moment. He wasn't the only one captivated. A small crowd gathered on the edge of the dance floor to watch her. His relief when the dance ended didn't last long, as the band switched to Rock Around the Clock. Joe danced with energy, and her beautiful dress really showed off her fantastic moves. Chris noticed less and less people on the dance floor, with everyone's attention now focused on them. He wasn't a professional dancer, but he tried to keep up. The band noticed the audience's interest and played longer than planned. They earned a loud round of applause when the song finally ended. Luckily, the music changed to a slow country two-step, bringing her into his arms. It felt nice to hold her close, but he wasn't used to such closeness, making him feel a bit flustered. As they turned together, she playfully leaned against him, then gently moved away. He looked down at her smiling face and realized she may have done that on purpose. Instead of letting him walk her to the table, she led the way, which helped him collect himself until they reached her seat. The men around watched her with interest, and the women noticed Chris quickly sit down, amused at his reaction to his dance partner. They knew their husbands were also captivated, but Chris had made it clear his relationship with Joe was just friends. It was both funny and embarrassing for him to be so clearly affected by her dancing. Sandra smiled, Sue giggled quietly, and Rebecca laughed softly. Chris couldn't help but blush even more. As often happens, the men started chatting with Joe, giving their wives a chance to wonder about the charming young man who danced with her. His questioning went on until his companion suggested it was time to leave for their last-minute shopping tomorrow. By then, he was relieved that he didn't hold any important secrets, or he might have shared them all. A group of young valets rushed to help Joe into the large pickup. They hung around while one of them assisted her into her seat, and she gracefully shifted her legs. Though her little black dress was modest, it still showed a lot of leg when she sat down. She knew this and flashed the boys a smile as a thank you. "I guess I won't need to tip the valet when you're with me," Chris said quietly. "I could barely get my keys, but you had 4 guys at your service." "Oh, so I'm your personal assistant now?" she teased. He figured it out. "Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, right?" She laughed and nodded. When they arrived at the apartment, he opened the door to help her out of the truck, and he caught a wonderful glimpse. The view of her beautiful legs as she turned towards him was captivating. It got even better when she slowly got off the seat, placed her shoes on the step, and held onto his shoulder for support while taking his hand. He helped her down, and her dress fell back in place as he finally looked at her face. He couldn't tell if she was smirking or simply happy. They walked to the door together, her soft shoulder brushing against his arm. He unlocked the door, and she paused for a moment, stood on her tiptoes, and whispered, "I had a wonderful time tonight," before gently kissing his cheek. She opened the door and, for the first time, walked towards her bedroom with a lovely rhythm. He watched, feeling a mix of emotions. He needed another long, relaxing shower to ease the tension building inside him. She likely felt the same way. During breakfast, she asked him to show her all the pictures of his family on his phone and share stories about each family member. Then she looked at his mother and sister's social media pages. She was surprised to find his dad had a Facebook page, but noticed most pictures were of family, dogs, or hunting trips. Thanks to her earlier research, the shopping trip was quick and easy. She wouldn't let him see what she was buying, so he occupied himself with his phone while she shopped. She also wouldn't let him buy her anything else, even though they had just received an invitation to a private New Year's Eve party at the Clear Fork Clubhouse that morning. He had offered to get her something nice for the occasion. She said she had something suitable to wear, but couldn't resist glancing at the party dresses as she passed through that section. He noticed her pause for a moment over a dress before she moved on to the men's section to find something for his dad. Once she was out of view, he looked closely at the dress and thought how wonderful it would be as her Christmas gift. He bought it, had it wrapped, and tucked the bag among the other items he was carrying. To him, this shimmering silver dress was a gift not just for her, but also for all the men lucky enough to attend the New Year's Eve party. He felt good about his choice until he wondered what might happen if he dressed his young friend that way in front of a group of cheerful partygoers. Jo returned in less than half an hour with her final purchases, and they went out for lunch at a nearby restaurant. Later, they picked out a live 7-foot Black Hills spruce tree and a good number of decorations for the tree, the door, and the living room. He thought a simple cut tree would be enough, but Chris insisted on a live one, saying, "Because it's better for the planet. We can plant it after Christmas to help the air." He didn't argue, though he did wonder where they would plant such a large tree when they didn't own land in Texas. Setting up and decorating the tree was the first task, followed by putting up decorations on the front and back doors, the fireplace mantel, and other spots Jo wanted to brighten up. When they finished, he stood up to admire their work. The simple apartment looked amazing. Jo spent the rest of the afternoon carefully wrapping her purchases while he arranged his things in his closet, hiding 2 of Jo's gifts so she wouldn't have too many from her roommate under the tree. "Let's watch a Christmas movie on Hallmark," suggested his cheerful friend, who was wearing a cozy nightdress and decorated knee socks. She looked so cute, sitting on the couch with her feet tucked under her. He couldn't understand how she could sit like that. He thought it would be uncomfortable for him. Still, she really did look adorable. That night, he took a long shower to relax. Jo found her own way to unwind in her bedroom. His family must have spent the night nearby because they showed up with breakfast tacos at 7:30 a.m. Jo and Chris were still sipping their first cups of coffee when the doorbell rang. He opened the door, curious about who it could be, only to be surprised by his sisters. Jo, in her nightdress and knee socks, tried to escape, but the sisters caught her before she could get away. All she could think was that you only get one chance to make a first impression. Here she was in a nightgown with no makeup and her hair in loose waves that she had barely brushed. But the Alexanders didn't seem to mind. They smiled at her and welcomed her warmly. Then Donna said, "Jo, you look just as cute in person as in your photos. Grab another cup of coffee and show us your room. We can eat later." Mom wanted to join, so she got a cup of coffee, asked them to warm up the tacos, and sat down with the others. After the girls had left, Chris's dad said, "Wow, son, she's lovely." Chris nodded but reminded his dad that she was only a temporary roommate because of her situation. His dad smiled and said, "Your mom heard from Sandy Beck last night. Sandy thinks you're sweet on her, whatever that means." Chris got his dad a cup of coffee, heated the oven, and moved the foil-wrapped tacos to a covered dish before turning back to his dad. "I can't deny she's attractive, but our meeting has a story only she can share. So let me assure you our relationship is just friendly." "Sure, son. Keep telling yourself that," his dad said with a teasing smile before changing the subject to his work success and promotion. The table was set, fresh coffee was brewing, and they all laughed and chatted as the ladies returned. "Bubba, her room looks so nice and yours is so plain. You should let her help you decorate," said Donna, his youngest sister. "Don't you love how she has it set up, Bubba?" asked middle sister Diane. "I wouldn't know," Chris replied. "I haven't been in it since I helped her move in." The women all looked at Jo, who shrugged and said, "That's right. Today was the first time I entered his room. But I agree it could use some color. Maybe we can all work on it while I'm here." The timer rang, so Chris moved the tacos, salsa, milk, and orange juice to the table. The women filled the conversation. Diane mentioned she knew 2 friends who had attended TCU before moving to Vanderbilt. She offered to share her experiences with Jo. They talked about sororities, clubs that Jo should think about, the importance of supporting teams, and then shifted to what to expect in classes and grading. Even though she was in high school, Donna was taking all advanced courses and wondered if she should also apply to TCU. Then Diane would be in Nashville, and you all could see all three of us in one trip. This sparked a lively discussion among the Alexanders about the schools she had been accepted to, and if it was too late to apply to TCU. Joe and Chris listened, exchanging smiles. Once that conversation died down, they wanted to tour the apartment complex. Joe took the lead since she had explored more than Chris. He was surprised at how many people greeted Joe by name and introduced themselves to his family. The family loved the facilities, and the three girls decided they should exercise in the gym and run along the river trail, since they felt they had been eating a lot without enough activity. They convinced Chris to join them and persuaded Mom and Dad to at least work out with us for a bit. After warming up and stretching, the four younger ones did intense weight workouts, stretched again, and then headed out on the trail while Mom and Dad continued their easier workouts in the gym. With his sisters by his side, Chris led the way on the trail while the girls followed. He wanted to follow Joe, but looking at his sisters felt awkward, so he took the lead. Then he heard Diane say, "I hate to say it, but Bubba really looks good these days. I haven't seen him in workout clothes for a while." Donna and Joe nodded in agreement, and Chris smiled as he reconsidered what he thought was awkward. After they showered, they decided to take Chris's Ram to TCU and explore the campus. None of them, including Joe, had ever been there, and they were all impressed by the beautiful and compact campus. They couldn't buy any TCU gear since the bookstore was closed until the 27th, but they enjoyed a meal at world-famous Dutch's Hamburgers, where they had burgers and onion rings with shakes. They then walked around the campus and the football stadium. The football team was in Phoenix for a bowl game, and the students were home for the holidays, so they managed to sneak into the stadium through a gate that was only loosely secured. Amon G. Carter Stadium was nice and small, but much smaller compared to Neyland Stadium, where Chris's Volunteers played. It had recently been updated, and there were plans for added seating and luxury boxes. Chris kept quiet, but he knew about the new construction starting in January since it was one of his projects. The other project was a new stadium for the Texas Rangers. He wasn't too excited about that one, but he was looking forward to the challenge. Back at the apartment, they brought gifts from the RV inside, and then Chris followed Dan to a nearby RV park where he had made reservations. After checking in and getting settled, they went back to the apartment. The ladies had beautifully arranged the gifts around the tree. Christmas songs were playing, and cookies for Santa were baking. The once plain apartment felt cozy and inviting. They had been invited to a small Christmas Eve party at the Becks' home. The ladies wore their best casual outfits, while the men chose jeans, sweaters, and jackets. Though they felt a bit less dressed than the women, they still received compliments. The party was lively, filled with many interesting people who enjoyed showing off. There was a bit of competition in how everyone presented themselves, but the Alexanders and their guests held their own and made positive impressions on most of the crowd, except for a few who were a bit too proud or jealous. Joe, Diane, and Donna skillfully handled unwanted attention and smoothly redirected any advances. Chris noticed that many women were quite forward with their interest in him. Dan and Deborah also attracted attention when they were apart, but their wedding rings helped keep the more aggressive flirts at bay, even on a bustling Christmas Eve. At midnight, they thanked their hosts and returned to the apartment to open one gift each. Diane, Donna, and Deborah chose large boxes with similar wrapping. Joe had a small box wrapped in silver that was labeled, "From Santa." The others encouraged her to pick a larger box so they could match, and they all opened their gifts together. Inside, they found sweaters and stylish skirts with matching boots. Dan and Chris had similar gifts with new boots and finely crafted belts. As the night wore on and excitement faded, yawns began to surface. They hugged goodbye, and the Alexanders headed off to their RV park. Joe and Chris waved goodbye, exchanged awkward goodnights, and went to their rooms. Although they seemed closer when with family, there was an unmistakable sense of uneasiness between the roommates when alone in the apartment that hadn't been there before. As he had anticipated, his family returned at 8:30. Chris, wearing his new boots and belt, had coffee brewing, a tray of biscuits in the oven, a pan of grits cooking, and sausage gravy warming up when they arrived. After sharing hugs and smiles, the sisters went to find their new friend, who emerged in her new outfit, stunning everyone, including Chris. She wore a red sweater with her golden hair flowing over it, and her fashionable golden skirt and knee-high boots took everyone's breath away. Jo felt herself blush, their mom smiled, and the sisters giggled at Chris's reaction. Chris and his dad kept looking at each other until Mom thanked him for making breakfast and urged them to eat. After a quick cleanup, Chris placed the big ham in the oven while everyone got ready in the living room for their gifts. Chris took on the role of Santa, carefully stacking presents around each person until everyone had their share. The family tradition was to open gifts one at a time so that everyone could enjoy the moment together. They started with the youngest, Donna, and ended with the oldest, Dan. Jo held a silver-wrapped gift from Santa, but Chris playfully reminded her that gifts from Santa were opened last, so she put it back and chose another instead. For the ladies, the gifts included clothing, fancy perfume, and stylish athletic shoes and socks from Jo. The men received aftershave and nice shirts, but their big surprise was matching shotguns from Italy. Jo gave Chris a new pair of cross trainers that he had needed. She gave their dad a camouflage jacket for his bird hunting hobby, and he excitedly thanked her, making her smile brightly. After each gift was opened, hugs and kisses were shared between the giver and receiver. Chris got a soft kiss on his cheek when Jo opened her new iPhone, which had a note saying it was covered by his plan. Jo had teary eyes but managed to stay composed and said it was Diane's turn. After everyone else had opened their gifts, only the presents from Santa were left. When Donna opened her box, she found diamond earrings and squealed with joy. "Santa knew I just got my ears pierced." She jumped up, ran to Chris, hugged him tightly, and exclaimed, "Tell Santa I love him." Chris hugged her back and promised he would. Jo found a lovely pearl necklace and earrings in her box, but her reaction was different. She stood still, looking worried. After a moment, she glanced around and noticed everyone was looking at Chris. He sat there innocently and asked what she received. She held up the necklace and earrings before bursting into tears. She rushed to her room crying, with Donna and Diane following quickly. Mom shook her head with a smile at Chris and went after the girls. Dan turned to Chris with a knowing smile. "That was quite a gesture, son. Maybe a little too much? She can't give back, you know." Chris shrugged, looking confused. Santa had a good year and wanted to give her something nice since she only has inexpensive jewelry and has been through a lot lately. I think he wanted her to know she's still on his nice list. "You have a kind heart, and I am proud of you. So are your mom and sisters. You care deeply, but sometimes you might go a little overboard. She's not someone who is broken and needs fixing, you know. And if you want to help, remember that you can't change her life in just a week or two. You need to take your time and be gentle. She's a strong-willed girl who has navigated through tough times, and she plans to shape her own future. They will be back in a bit. Ask her to show you her talent and act surprised. She will understand, but it gives her some cover. Like I said, she is a proud girl." They came back in less than 5 minutes, and Chris followed his father's advice. She still looked a bit upset, but most of the worry went away from Joe's lovely face when he asked if he could help her with the necklace. She wanted to put on the earrings first. The pearl earrings hanging in her golden hair were lovely, but once he managed to clasp the pearl necklace around her neck, it looked even more beautiful. He moved around to stand in front of her, taking in the sight, and said, "Very nice. Santa must think you're on the nice list." She gently bit her lip and replied, "Thank you for the kind words. Santa is really generous to a girl from the Ouachita." They shared a smile at their little joke, and he went back to his seat. "Your turn, Diane." Santa gave Diane a gold tennis bracelet with charms representing her sorority and the student government. She squealed with delight, hugged Chris tightly, and joyfully exclaimed, "Thank you, Santa. You're the best." Deborah received a diamond watch from Santa to replace the one her dad gave her for Christmas 30 years ago. It had stopped working, and the jeweler said it couldn't be fixed. With tears in her eyes, she sat on her son's lap, took his face in her hands, and told him, "Tell Santa that I love him so much and that he's the sweetest man in the world." Santa had one last gift, a sports watch for Dan that tracked his heart rate, blood pressure, exercise, and sleep. He didn't sit on Chris's lap, but Dan hugged him tightly instead, saying thank you to Santa. The table was beautifully set and filled with warm food that Chris and Joe had prepared. green bean casserole, broccoli with cheese, sweet potato pie, a large ham, and fresh bread from a bakery nearby. The pecan pies were also from the bakery, but Jo made the brownies herself. After cleanup, they planned to go for a long walk along the river to enjoy the outdoors. When they got back, they kept their Christmas tradition by watching It's a Wonderful Life. They felt sluggish from eating too much, so Diane started browsing through his DVD collection. She found a set of movies starring Grace Kelly, To Catch a Thief, Rear Window, and The Country Girl. "Oh, you still like Grace Kelly, huh?" she joked. "Which one should we watch?" To Catch a Thief got the most votes. Halfway through the film, Diane paused it on a scene of Grace Kelly with her hair blowing in the wind. She turned to Jo with a thoughtful look and said, "Wow, you could be her little sister?" Jo was surprised. She didn't know much about Grace Kelly, and no one had ever said she looked like her before. Sure, guys might have compared her to some stars when they were trying to impress her, but never Grace Kelly. She wondered if anyone from her hometown had even heard of her. Everyone looked at Jo, then back at the screen, and then at Jo again. "The Golden Ratio," Chris suggested. One by one, the others nodded. Jo replied, "I have no idea what that means. Can we just watch the movie? This is kind of strange." They continued watching the film without saying anything more, but Jo started to notice moments when the main actress did remind her a bit of herself. After the movie, Jo asked, "So Chris really likes Grace Kelly?" "Not quite an obsession," Deborah said with a grin. "But Dan and I have always enjoyed Alfred Hitchcock's films. When Chris was around 12, we watched this movie together. About halfway through, Chris asked about the pretty blonde lady. We told him about the Princess of Monaco and how she passed away in a car accident when she was young. He was really interested, and she kind of became his idea of beauty. He often compares celebrities to her in a not-so-flattering way. The Golden Ratio is a way to measure parts of her face," Deborah continued. "A man named Marquardt said this ratio defines beauty in a mathematical way. He even made a shape that should fit her face perfectly. Chris thinks it fits yours, too." Jo had a slight frown as she listened, then looked confused by the idea that beauty could be measured. While she understood that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, the concept of the Golden Ratio was new to her. Then she smiled when she realized what his mom said and teased Chris, "So I'm your idea of beauty." "I didn't say that. I just mentioned the Golden Ratio might fit you," he replied with a grin. Her smile widened, making Chris's sisters laugh, and their parents chuckled too. He knew he was in trouble, so he awkwardly told Diane to start the movie again. That only made everyone laugh louder. His dad saved him by suggesting they have sandwiches with leftover bread and ham, along with some of Jo's delicious brownies. They agreed and went to the kitchen, with Jo still wearing a smile. After another meal and a walk before dark, the Alexanders took the Jeep, packed full of things they had collected, back to the RV park. With everyone else gone, things felt a bit awkward, so they all went to bed early. The next 4 days flew by. The day after Christmas, the whole family exercised, ran, visited, ate, and watched the TCU Horned Frogs play the California Bears in the Cheez-It Bowl. It was a tough game, with the Bears scoring first and the Horned Frogs tying the game in the fourth quarter. They ended up in overtime tied at 7, and the Frogs kicked a field goal to win 107. People remembered the game for its many interceptions, strong defenses, and struggling offenses. The women grew bored and went to Jo's room during halftime. Dad felt sleepy and dozed off. Chris was bored too, but he just couldn't look away. He had to see what would happen next, maybe a surprising interception, a fumble, or a blocked punt. It was clear neither team could score easily, so he hoped the strong defenses or special teams would create a chance. He sighed with relief when the Frogs made the field goal in overtime, not just because they won, but because the game was finally over. They kept up their daily workouts, went to a Mavericks basketball game in Dallas, visited the Fort Worth Zoo, and hit the TCU bookstore as soon as it reopened. With plenty of purple and white clothes to wear, they proudly cheered for the Horned Frogs during a men's basketball game on the 29th. The girls had become very close friends, often disappearing into Jo's room or wandering off somewhere together. In those moments, Chris could hear soft talking, giggles, and laughter, sometimes interrupted by loud bursts of joy. His parents thought it was wonderful how well the girls got along. He was curious about what they were laughing about. His mom thought it was so sweet that she sometimes joined them. When that happened, things grew quieter, yet the giggles became louder. His dad just smiled at Chris's frowns and encouraged him to let the girls enjoy themselves. The 30th arrived too soon. The Alexanders packed into their RV and drove back to Nashville for a New Year's Eve party at their favorite neighbor's home. The sisters hugged Joe tightly before leaving, promising they would come to visit often. Donna renewed her promise to apply to TCU, and Mom wiped her tears while Dad watched quietly. Chris got hugs and kisses too, but not like their new best friend. Suddenly alone and left to their own plans, Joe and Chris felt a bit off. Without anyone saying anything, things had changed. They exercised, ran, and worked on their computers, but the easy friendship they had before was now tense. Neither knew how to move forward. On the 31st, Chris was studying the design for the Carter renovation and expansion when Joe left around noon to go to the gym. When she returned, he was gone, and there wasn't even a note. However, on her bed lay a shiny silver dress, and on the floor were matching heels. "For tonight's party," said the note. Joe marched around the apartment complex looking for him. When she found him, she was ready to let him know how upset she was about spending money she couldn't repay. But no matter how hard she looked, he was nowhere to be found. She went back to her room, looked at the dress, and recognized it as the one she had hesitated over at Macy's. She ran her finger down the soft material, admired how it sparkled in the light, and then held it against herself while looking in the mirror. Wow, no wonder Chris bought it for her. He clearly thought she would look great in it. She sat down on the bed, laid the dress beside her, curled up, and had a long talk with herself. Chris didn't come back until an hour before the party was to start at 8. Joe was in her room, so he quietly began getting ready in his. He came out 10 minutes before the party started and took a seat on the couch. Joe appeared 5 minutes before they were to leave, looking stunning in her silver dress and high heels, with her pearl earrings and necklace. Although she still felt uneasy about his expensive gifts, when she saw his face, all her doubts faded. She was 18 and had never had a boyfriend before, but she recognized the admiration in his eyes. Suddenly, she loved the dress. His charcoal suit matched perfectly, and together they looked like royalty at the NYE Clear Fork Ball until the clock struck midnight. Not long after they arrived, Joe noticed that Chris wasn't the only one who thought she looked beautiful. Many people complimented her, and several even tried to ask her to dance. She joked with them but turned down their offers. As they had agreed on the way to the party, she danced with anyone who asked, including Chris, who asked often. He also danced with others. But Joe realized she noticed more than she thought she would. Too many beautiful women were drawn to him, and it seemed like many were making their interest clear. This made her feel uneasy. For the first time, she experienced jealousy about a man. Finally, around 11:20, after a persistent brunette in a revealing dress had been dancing closely with Chris, Joe turned down dance requests and ignored other advances. She made up an excuse to go to the restroom and then set out to find her roommate. After finishing his dance with the brunette, who smiled and said she would look for him later, Chris stood tall and scanned the room, searching for someone. He frowned when he couldn't find what he wanted, but then smiled brightly when Joe appeared and took his arm. "I have an idea, Chris," she said. "I know you've had many offers tonight, but what if we danced only with each other for the rest of the evening? Would you want to do that?" Wow. If the belle of the ball wants to spend an hour away from her admirers, who am I to say no? I accept, and I bet you've had more offers than I have. None included just dancing, Chris, unless you count dancing in cars, Joe said with a laugh. His favorite song started playing, and Chris offered his hand. She took it, and they were still on the dance floor, swaying together even after several more songs played. When the music stopped, the countdown began. 10, 9, 8. As the first notes of Auld Lang Syne started, Joe stood on her tiptoes, looking up into Chris's eyes, her hand resting on the back of his neck and her other hand holding his arm. He hesitated, then Joe gently pulled his head down and gave him a passionate New Year's kiss. Moving in his arms, she leaned closer against him. She wrapped her arm around his back, getting even nearer. Her dress didn't allow for a layer underneath, so she felt pressed against his shirt. She wiggled a bit more, which stirred something inside her. With the difference in their heights, she felt his body close to hers. She moved a little, feeling the warmth between them. In that kiss, all her years of fear and self-control melted away, and Joe felt a strong attraction to the man beside her. In that moment, she wanted to give herself to him without any hesitation. Chris was caught up in the feeling. He had noticed his growing feelings for the young woman in his arms, but to suddenly have her moving against him in the middle of a crowd, her mouth open, and sharing an intense kiss was surprising. His left hand was on her back, holding her close. Without thinking, his right hand moved down the side of her dress until it rested on her hip. Without wanting to, his hand continued lower, reaching for something he had admired since he first saw her in those jeans. His mind must have realized where they were because he slowly became aware of the people around them, watching them with wide eyes. He moved his hand back up to her waist, gently pulled her away, and softened the kiss so he could speak. "Joe," he whispered, holding her still. "We should go back to the apartment now." She looked up at him with dreamy eyes. He nodded toward the crowd and let go of her arms. She turned slightly to see the faces watching them. At first, she seemed confused, but then it dawned on her. It was the passion they had shared that drew everyone's attention. A very attractive young man with a lovely partner watched them from nearby. She buried her face against Chris's chest to hide from the stares, but she heard the handsome young man say, "Cindy, we better head home now or I might not be able to wait." "Not until we—" Cindy replied softly. She embraced her partner and showed the same passion she had with Joe. Her partner responded, and they moved together as the crowd sang songs of old times. Joe imagined how they must have appeared, wrapped in each other's arms. Chris gently pulled away just enough to lead his girlfriend toward the coat check, where the attendant smiled and handed Joe her shiny wrap. "Hope you had fun," she said, while Chris guided Joe out the door and along the walkway to their apartment, their arms around each other. They stepped inside before diving back into kissing and moving close again. Chris was not new to relationships. He had been with many women until he met Becky. After she turned him down, he took some time to feel sad but then returned to his old habits. Soon, he noticed that the joy he once felt had faded away, leaving him feeling empty and restless afterward. He had become quite good at charming women, igniting their interest until they welcomed him into their lives. On New Year's Eve, surrounded by a crowd, Chris and Joe had shared a moment so intense that it ignited something between them, a deep connection neither of them expected. Now, back in the quiet of their apartment, they found themselves alone. The atmosphere was charged, and Joe's presence filled the room with warmth. Chris gently brushed Joe's hair away from her face and looked into her eyes, seeing the same emotion he felt inside. Without a word, he let go of her hair and guided her dress off her shoulders, allowing it to slip gracefully to the floor. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms. She held on, resting her head on his shoulder as he carried her to the bed. With care, he laid her down on the soft sheets, and she moved slightly, making herself more comfortable as Chris stood nearby, taking in her beauty. Joe gazed up at him, her heart full, and she raised her hands toward him, signaling that she was ready. Chris smiled gently, removing her shoes with a tenderness that made her smile back. "Please," Joe whispered softly. "I've waited so long. Don't make me wait anymore." Chris's hands moved with care, making her feel cherished. He sat down beside her, gently helping her relax as he slowly eased the tension from the moment. Joe looked up at him, feeling the warmth of his presence and the love they shared, knowing that this night was special. The moment was about connection, trust, and love, two people coming together, sharing something meaningful. Chris gazed at Joe, admiring her beauty as she lay there, her body relaxed and open to the moment. She looked at him with longing, knowing he was taking his time, fully appreciating the connection they shared. "You are absolutely stunning," he whispered gently, his voice full of admiration. "Like you were made perfectly, without flaw." Joe's heart raced at his words, feeling the warmth of the moment between them. She reached out for him, her eyes pleading for him to come closer, the intensity of the moment building. Chris smiled softly, knowing how much this night meant to both of them. He wanted it to be special, something neither of them would ever forget. He leaned down and whispered again, "You're the most beautiful person I've ever seen, Joe. I want this to be a night we'll always remember." He began to show her his love with tender gestures, taking his time, making her feel cherished. His hands moved gently, and his lips pressed soft kisses along her legs, making her smile in quiet anticipation. Joe felt the warmth of his touch, and every gentle kiss made her heart beat faster. Chris was careful and patient, knowing this moment was about their bond, their love. They shared a deep connection, and he wanted her to feel that fully. He continued to make her feel loved, and Joe's joy and happiness grew with each passing second. She knew that this night was about more than just a physical connection. It was about the love they shared, the trust between them, and the memories they were making together. As the night went on, they both felt the deep sense of closeness and understanding that had brought them together. It was a night of warmth, care, and shared love, something they would always carry with them. Joe's legs wrapped tightly around Chris, her hands holding him close as she moved with intensity, feeling completely immersed in the moment. He was focused, giving her his full attention, making sure she felt cared for. Chris stayed calm, knowing how much this meant to her. His hands supported her gently, and he continued to be patient and careful, ensuring she felt comfortable and at ease. Despite the overwhelming intensity, he remained focused on making her feel loved and appreciated. As Joe's emotions built up, Chris decided it was time to shift his attention, wanting to make sure their connection felt as special to her as it did to him. He took a brief pause and smiled up at her, noticing how her excitement had grown. Joe finally relaxed, her tension releasing, and she smiled down at him with joy. "Wow, that was amazing," she said with a laugh, her voice light but full of happiness. Looking into his eyes, she added, "I've waited a long time to feel this way. It was worth it. My friends didn't understand, but I knew this moment would be different, and now I know I was right." Her face lit up with happiness as she continued, "You are my Prince Charming, my hero. This moment is everything I hoped it would be." She smiled, clearly feeling a mix of satisfaction and joy, but then teasingly warned, "But if you don't give me a break, I might need to ask for some space. Even I can only handle so much excitement in one night." Chris chuckled, giving her a soft, reassuring smile before gently stepping back, allowing her to relax fully as they shared a quiet, contented moment together. Chris shifted his hands gently from her hips to her inner thighs, moving carefully. He hesitated for a moment, but Joe didn't pull away. As he paused, a question formed in his mind. "You're a virgin?" he asked softly, a bit surprised. Joe smiled playfully and responded, "I told you, Prince Charming, I saved myself for you, so yes, I am." Chris felt a mix of emotions, mostly awe and gratitude, but also a little disbelief. "Joe, I'm sorry, I didn't know. I assumed someone as amazing as you." He trailed off, feeling unsure. She laughed lightly. "Didn't I prove to you I'm wild like a river? I nearly overwhelmed you." "Yes, but I thought, you said you choose who and when," he replied, still a bit confused. "I do and I did. I chose you," she said with a smile. "Though I guess I didn't know enough to pick exactly what would happen." Joe's playful grin returned and she teased him. "But there's still something left, right? I'm still a virgin and I think it's about time that changes, don't you?" Chris looked at her thoughtfully, and Joe, with a mix of affection and impatience, tugged at his hair. "Come on, Chris. I choose you for this too. Let's make this night complete." Chris smiled but didn't rush. He kissed her softly, letting the moment be about them, taking his time. Joe, feeling the growing connection, wrapped her arms around him, her excitement clear. As the night went on, Joe's playful nature returned. "You're going to wear me out with all this care," she teased, but there was warmth in her voice. "Now come here, Christian." Chris was gentle and careful, making sure Joe was comfortable and at ease. He moved slowly, watching her expression for any sign of discomfort. When she asked him to wait, he stopped immediately, giving her a moment to adjust. She smiled up at him, half joking. "I didn't know this would be quite so much." "And I didn't know you'd be such a challenge either," he replied with a grin, the mood light but filled with love. The night was about trust, closeness, and love, and together they shared something special, making it a moment neither of them would forget. They took their time, letting their bond grow stronger with each passing second, knowing this night was just the beginning of something deeper. Joe looked at Chris nervously. "Are you sure this will work?" Chris smiled gently, trying to reassure her. "I think it will. It might take a little time, but once we're together, everything will fall into place." He knew she was feeling anxious, given how delicate she seemed, and he wanted to make sure she felt safe. "Maybe you should be in control. That way you can go at your own pace." Joe hesitated but agreed, adjusting herself cautiously as Chris shifted beneath her. She gasped at the unfamiliar sensation. "Wow, I didn't expect this. You're really not small." Chris laughed softly, trying to lighten the moment. "It's just that you're petite, Joe. Take your time, there's no rush." As Joe moved carefully, Chris's hands rested gently on her sides, offering comfort. He was patient, encouraging her to go slowly and find what worked best for her. Joe winced slightly, feeling overwhelmed. "Chris, this feels so different. I don't know if I can handle all of it." Chris reassured her again. "You don't have to rush. We can stop any time. We can take this at your pace." But Joe was determined. "No, I want this. I want tonight to be special, something we remember." She leaned down, kissed him softly, and with a mix of nervousness and confidence, she continued. Chris admired her strength and bravery, knowing how much this meant to her. He supported her, making sure every step was comfortable. The night was filled with moments of tenderness and love as they shared something meaningful and built trust between them. Joe's focus was on their bond, knowing this experience was about connection, not just physicality. They took their time, moving together slowly, letting their love guide them through the night. Joe's eyes widened in surprise, and she gasped as she felt a sudden shift. She collapsed onto Chris's chest, letting out a soft, teasing complaint. "Ouch! That hurt, you big brute!" she said, though there was a note of amusement in her voice. Chris chuckled gently. "Hey, I wasn't the one who decided to rush things. You did that all on your own," he teased back, trying to lighten the mood. Joe giggled, shifting her hips carefully to ease the discomfort. As the sensation became more manageable, she moved with more confidence. Little by little, she explored how they fit together, testing small movements and growing more comfortable with each adjustment. Chris, lying underneath her, let his hands roam across her back, marveling at the soft yet strong feel of her body. He couldn't help but smile as he touched her, feeling closer to her with every moment. As he gently traced his fingers over her skin, he realized just how much he enjoyed this connection. Joe began to find her rhythm, becoming more confident in her movements. As she did, she leaned down and kissed him deeply, her excitement clear as she shared the moment with him. Her kisses were tender, filled with emotion, as she embraced the closeness they were experiencing. "Chris, is it always like this?" she asked breathlessly. "Will it always feel this good?" Chris, still catching his breath from their shared moment, smiled. "I don't know, Joe. You're so full of energy and so quick to learn. This is all new for me, too." Joe's curiosity bubbled up again. "But haven't you? Been with others? Am I really different?" Chris looked at her seriously, wanting her to understand how special this moment was. "Joe, I don't even remember the others right now. You are different. You're beautiful inside and out, and this moment with you feels like nothing I've ever experienced before." Joe smiled softly at his words, her insecurities fading away. She leaned in for another kiss, their connection deepening as they held each other close. The night was about more than just their physical closeness. It was about the trust and bond they were building together, something far more meaningful than either of them had expected. "You have a lovely scent and your taste is wonderful. Whether you are talking, singing, laughing, or making soft sounds, your voice is truly captivating to me. Yes, I've been with other women, and I thought I was in love with Becky, but you've shown me that my feelings for her were shallow compared to how I feel about you." She lowered her head, cozied up to him, moved closer, and softly asked, "Are you saying this just because we're close right now? Will you still feel the same in the morning?" Chris was shocked that she thought he was just playing with her feelings. He took her golden hair in his hands and raised her head to meet her gaze, wanting her to see how serious he was. But when he looked into her sparkling eyes, They were filled with joy and a little mischief. He realized she was teasing him again. He pulled her in closer and turned them over. Her eyes were wide now, still filled with playfulness. "So, is this where you just focus on yourself and forget about me?" He replied, "No, this is where I make sure we both enjoy ourselves." He followed through on his promise. He made her laugh and squeal in delight, and they shared many joyful moments together. Once she joined in more actively, she challenged him, and it filled the room with excitement. He was completely engaged, using all his energy to make the experience wonderful for both of them. At one point, he wondered if her temperature felt unusually high because she seemed so alive and vibrant, like she was radiating warmth. Even with all his determination, he found himself reaching the end sooner than he planned, unsure if they had really counted all their joyful moments. She gently shifted away but stayed close, facing him. She nestled up against him and said, "Maybe I shouldn't feel jealous about the women before. I don't think everyone is as good as you. Not really, just a person connecting with someone they truly like. But how do you, the one with less experience, know so much about all this?" She smiled and replied, "Well, there's this amazing thing called the internet. It has so much information about everything, especially relationships." He chuckled and said, "So you've been researching online?" "No, silly. They keep track of that stuff on servers and I would have gotten in trouble." Joe sat up and smiled at Chris. "I used to spend time reading a lot, especially during those long bus rides," she said, hinting at her curiosity about certain things. Chris looked at her, suddenly worried. "Wait, not my sisters?" he blurted out, horrified. She grinned mischievously. "Oh yes, your sisters were great for advice. What did you think we were talking about behind closed doors all the time? Even your mom chimed in once or twice." Chris's eyes went wide. "My mom was talking to you about that?" Joe simply patted his head, grinning, as if he only knew half the story. Later, they both fell into a deep, restful sleep. Chris dreamed of a beautiful blonde who seemed almost magical, like a goddess. In the dream, she led him on a journey of discovery, showing him things he never knew. The dream was calm, peaceful, and filled with wonder. When he woke up, Joe was lying next to him, her head resting on his chest. She looked up at him with a playful expression. Chris couldn't help but smile as he admired the moment of quiet happiness between them. Suddenly, the silence was broken by the ringing of his phone. Chris laughed, ignoring the sound. "Let's not worry about that. Let's just enjoy the morning," he said, pulling her close. Joe laughed too, playfully pushing him away. "Not today, Chris. I need some rest. We can save the rest of the day for something else." She winked, teasing him lightly. Chris smiled, knowing they shared something special. The moment was filled with warmth and affection as they settled back into each other's company, enjoying the quiet morning together, free from any distractions or worries. She looked at his phone on the nightstand, smiled, picked it up, and put it on speaker. "Say hello," she signaled with her lips. "I'm sorry, but my car warranty hasn't expired yet. Call me back in 5 years," Chris replied. Joe had to cover her mouth to stop the laughter. "Chris, stop that. We're calling because Joe isn't answering her phone, and we want to wish her a happy new year." "Where is she?" Donna asked. "Don't you want to wish your sweet brother a happy new year?" he said, pretending to be hurt. "Happy New Year, Chris," they all said together, and then Donna asked, "Now where is she?" "I'm not sure. We went to the party last night. I had too much to drink, and she left with a big guy. No telling where she is now." "Chris," his sister yelled, "you better not be lying. Joe would never do something like that." "Don't yell. My head hurts, and I feel heavy." "Are you okay? You're not having a heart attack, are you?" Diane asked quickly. "Give me that phone, you knucklehead," Joe said. "No, he's just teasing you two." "Joe, where are you? Are you in bed with Chris?" Diane asked loudly. She managed to break free from him, jumped off the bed, and ran out of the room, giggling when he tried to grab her. As he heard her door slam and lock, he sighed. "No morning fun for you, brute. Might as well get up and make coffee." The laughter and playful shouts from Joe's room were cheerful and loud. He smiled and enjoyed his fresh coffee. Without his phone, he couldn't check the news, so he let his mind drift to their first night together. "Wow, she is even more stunning than I thought. The way others look at her is something else. If they ever see how amazing she really is, I might need to keep a closer eye on her, he thought. But now that she knows how much she enjoys being with someone, will she want to explore? She's so beautiful. How will I keep her close? Why would you even think that? You wouldn't want to hold her back during her college years, would you? She needs to enjoy her time and make great memories just like you did. She's just 18. You can't keep her here. She deserves to experience everything. She's a star in her own right, not just someone's partner. Accept that this is her path. You had bad timing with this. Let her go and grow. Maybe one day she'll come back, though maybe not. Tough situation, my friend, but it's true. She's young, but a smart and beautiful young lady, so you need to let her find her own way. His own point of view weighed on him. He thought about adding a little something to his coffee, but changed his mind when he heard her door open. She walked toward him, wearing a loose jersey that showed a hint of white underneath, looking as nice as she had the night before in her pretty dress. Not as carefree as when she was resting on his dark sheets, but still. All thoughts of giving her space left his mind. Forget about the future. She was here with him now. She placed his phone on the counter, poured herself a cup of coffee, set it next to his, and sat right on his lap. I really love your family. They are all so sweet and fun, she said happily after giving him a quick kiss. I hope you're talking about my sisters. If my parents called you three, I'm going to change my number. She giggled. I didn't hear your dad's voice, so I don't know where he was. Please don't tell me my mom was there listening to you all talk about last night. Not the whole time, silly, she laughed again. She just came in to say hello and wish us a happy new year. Okay, that's better. So what did you tell my sisters? He asked, half joking, expecting too much. Do you really want to know? She asked playfully, shaking her head. Maybe not. So how is the little kitty feeling now? Ready to have some fun? Maybe after a nice walk to the hot tub and an hour of relaxing, but not just yet. Well, let's get moving, he said cheerfully. Time is ticking. Coffee, breakfast, get dressed, walk to the hot tub, then we'll see how things go. But first, I need more coffee, and then you need to make me breakfast. You can't expect me to burn all my energy without feeding me. I can't get you coffee or make breakfast with someone sitting on my lap, can I? Do you really want me to move? She asked, shifting playfully on his lap. Well, maybe not right now, he replied with a smile. She sipped her coffee and talked about the fun they had dancing the night before. Then she shared stories about the people she met, the guys who danced with her, and some girls she thought were being too interested in Chris, saying he should stay away from them. He listened, smiling to himself. She was young, but sounded just like some of the other girls he had dated. Do you want breakfast, or are you planning to sit on my lap all day talking about the dance? He asked, pretending to be annoyed. She stood up. No, I'm letting you up because you need to make me another cup of coffee. Yours is better than mine, and then you need to feed me. I'm starving. He made her coffee, then cooked her breakfast and ended up feeding her literally. She sat sideways on his lap. She fed him, and he fed her. He didn't realize how he looked when the spoon got close to his mouth, but she was really cute when he pretended to fly the spoon like an airplane, making noises and moving in loops before he placed the food in her mouth. While he enjoyed delivering food like that, she liked to kiss him right after he took a bite or had a sip of coffee or milk. Breakfast took twice as long as usual, but the last few minutes were filled with her sitting close to him and being playful. He wondered if he should try something more with her, but he saw that she still felt some discomfort. After they cleaned the kitchen, they put on their swimsuits and flip-flops and strolled to the hot tubs by the central pool, holding hands and chatting. When Joe removed her cover-up, he noticed and appreciated her. Joe glanced down, giggled, looked around, and said, Not yet. Let's see how things go in the hot tub. As they prepared to enjoy the hot tub together, 2 more couples came outside. She was sitting on him, and he was being affectionate towards her when they heard the friendly voices. She returned to her seat beside him, and he leaned forward a bit to be less noticeable. There were 2 hot tubs, but the other couples spotted them and came over. I don't know if you remember us from the dance, but I'm Mary, and this is my husband, John. This is Don and his wife, Lynn. They recognized each other, and Joe and Chris invited Mary, John, Don, and Lynn to join them. Chris was glad the bubbles hit him a bit, and Joe was drawing attention from the men. Chris sat next to Joe with Mary beside him, then John, Lynn, and Don filling up the space. While it was an 8-person hot tub, it was already getting cozy with everyone so close together. The conversation flowed easily, with Joe asking about where they were from and what they did. John and Don had recently graduated and were working for a nearby cybersecurity startup. They were pleased to learn that Chris had a degree in engineering along with courses in management and business. They even joked about their fraternity connections, sharing laughs and secret handshakes. Mary and Lynn were seniors and proud of their achievements. Everyone was surprised to learn that Joe was a new freshman. "We thought you were at least 21, Lynn exclaimed. "Oh my goodness, you're very mature for your age. You and your, what, boyfriend, or are you married?" Joe looked at Chris, who smiled at her. "He's my boyfriend, my new boyfriend." "Well, new or not, you two made a big impression at the party last night. You in that sparkling dress and those lovely pearls. You stole the show. And Chris in his matching suit, wow. Half the people there wanted to talk to you, and some tried to talk to both of you." "None of us did, though. We're all newlyweds, but we did chat about you." Don turned to Chris. "So, how old are you, Chris? What's your story?" "I'm the oldest in the group," he said with a laugh. "I'm 25. I work for Beck Construction as a project manager." "Project manager at 25. That's pretty impressive. Built anything we'd recognize?" John asked. "Not yet. This is my first time in Texas. I've been working in Tennessee, where I'm from, and in Arkansas, where I met Joe." "Okay, sounds like a good story. Tell us," Mary insisted. Joe smiled at Chris. "Your turn." Chris started to share the straight facts of his story, but he liked these people and felt playful. "This lovely girl here is so talented she graduated high school early. TCU offered her scholarships, but she needed a ride down here, so I offered to help. We chatted, and she mentioned she was from the Ouachita region, wearing faded jeans. I began joking about an old country song, Joe and the Cowboy. You guys look confused. Never heard that song?" They exchanged glances, shaking their heads in confusion. Joe chimed in, "Of course they haven't. You're an old millennial who loves classic country. None of us younger folks know about that stuff." "Hey, you do. You sing it. Come on, sing with me to help them out," Chris pleaded. She shook her ponytail playfully, but the smile on her face showed she was in a fun mood too. "I know you want to, so I'm going to get us started, and I hope you'll join in." He turned to the others and said, "By the way, she sang this with me on our way down, so don't let her fool you. She knows classic country music too. Life can be fun on the highway when you're driving through Arkansas. I won't forget the day I met the girl from the Ouachita River. While I was passing through Little Rock, I saw her waving for a ride. I stopped to let her in and saw a glimpse of something special in her worn jeans." Chris splashed water on her arm to get her attention, and as the chorus started, she smiled and joined in. "Wild like a rushing river, Joe holds my heart in her hands. Sweet country girl, I'd give anything to be your full-time partner." Joe looked at him shyly when she started singing her part, but his happy smile made her voice more full and warm. She said, "Thanks for stopping. My name is Joe. You look like a cowboy to me. I see from your car that you're from Tennessee, and you're a handsome cowboy, probably the best-looking guy I've seen." I replied, "You're not so bad yourself for a country girl in those cute jeans." Wild like a rushing river, Joe holds my heart in her hands. Sweet country girl, I'd give anything to be your full-time partner. They sang the whole song, smiling at each other, and got a round of applause at the end. "That is so sweet," Mary exclaimed. "You two are adorable. I'm now a fan of country." Chris noticed the surprised looks on John and Don's faces after her interruption. "She can sing too? Like that?" John asked in disbelief. "Joe, you should join Tri-Delt. We're the best sorority on campus, and we win the talent show every year. I can already picture our next trophy after you shine on stage in April." Joe quickly answered, looking a bit worried. "I can't join a sorority. I need to keep my grades high for my scholarships, and honestly, I can't afford it." "Joe, we have tutors for every subject. We have the highest GPA on campus. I bet we can find a scholarship for you right after the sisters meet you. Where are you living? We have an opening in the house for spring." Chris saw that Joe was feeling overwhelmed, so he stepped in. "Those offers are wonderful, but Joe needs to meet her advisor on the 7th to figure things out. Remember, she was a high school senior in Arkansas just a short time ago, so she's still getting used to everything." The girls eagerly offered to show her around, help her register, and introduce her to others who are back on campus before classes start on the 10th. Joe looked to Chris for support. He hugged her and said, "How lucky can you get? We're heading to the hot tub for a soak and you've got seniors to help you out. You'll have all the registration forms filled out and know more about TCU than any new student by the time classes start." She gave him a proud look and said, "Actually, old fella, I've already completed all the registration forms. It's online these days." She turned to Mary and Lynn. "I would really appreciate your help with all this. To be honest, I'm feeling a bit stressed. I didn't decide to graduate early until late October, so all I had time to do was create a resume, fill out college applications, write essays, and finish my high school courses. My high school counselor told me about the TCU scholarship offers on November 16th. I turned 18 2 days later, got a ride down here with Chris that night, and, well, you know the rest. Anyway, I would gladly accept any help you can give me." "Do we really know the rest, Joe? How did you end up with that guy at the dance, and what about that moment at midnight? I think Chris left out some details." "He might have, but our story has many twists and turns. He convinced me to use his extra room, promising a friendly relationship, and then surprised me by taking me to the country club to meet his co-workers and their spouses. Oh yes, he really did that. And to make it even more surprising, I found out from one of the wives that his parents were coming the next day. He really caught me off guard." The girls looked at him with frowns. He raised his hands and said, "What? It was just my mom, dad, and my 2 sisters. Ask her if they treated her badly at all." The girls turned their attention back to Joe. "No, they were all wonderful. In fact, I consider his sisters to be my best friends, though I hope we can be friends too. Anyway, they are a lovely family, thoughtful, sweet, loving, and all of them are quite attractive. Chris is the odd one out in the looks department." Then they must be a really good-looking family," said Lynn, after taking a good look at Chris. "So go on." "They are also kind and generous, and they give really nice Christmas gifts. Did you see the dress, shoes, and pearl earrings I wore at the ball? Those were gifts from Santa, and his family filled my closet with nicer clothes than I've ever had. To be honest, my kind roommate also bought me a few things, like 4 dresses and 4 pairs of jeans and blouses, so I wouldn't stand out in my old jeans and hoodies when I started school. I told him I wasn't looking for someone to take care of me, but he did it anyway, no strings attached." "Oh, wow. So the charming older guy who said he was just your friend got you clothes and jewelry? Did he really keep his promise of no strings attached?" "Because I would have been pretty curious about why he was interested," Mary joked. "He did, but he started to like me during all this maybe while I was wearing that little black dress and the heels he bought me for meeting his bosses, or maybe when we went to the event. I'm not sure, but I think it was during our first run along the river. He kept falling back and watching me and had this funny expression." Chris just shook his head and smiled while the others cheered him on. Finally, he said, "Actually, it might have been the first time I saw you in those fitted jeans." "Oh, that was the first time he met you when you got a ride with him, right? Just like the song?" Lynn said to a smiling Joe. They exchanged smiles, and Mary added, "You two are adorable. But those looks aren't just friendly, and the kiss he gave you last night. Wow! Not just friendly." "He didn't kiss me last night, I kissed him. I got tired of playing it cool around him and of waiting for something to happen, so I took charge, and then quickly lost my nerve. I don't remember a lot about that first kiss, other than wishing it would go on forever. But to make a long story short, things escalated. I woke up in his bed this morning, and now he finally admits that I'm his girlfriend. You know, I don't really enjoy romantic comedies that much, but you two tell a good story," John said. "After hearing it, I'm feeling the urge to take my wife for a nap. But before we go, I want to say it's a wonderful tale. Even though we only got a cleaner version, my mind filled in the gaps quite well. I thought our first meeting at a party was something special, but wow! You two lived out Joe's song and created quite the story with your first kiss. That's what I call a great story. Now, my lovely wife, I'd like to stiffly walk back to our room and enjoy a nice nap with you." They got up smiling, and he didn't even try to hide his excitement. He grabbed a laughing Mary, and they started across the patio toward their room. Mary looked back. "Thanks, everyone. I can tell he really enjoyed your story." Lynn gave Don a playful look that made him blush and declared, "We need a nap too, sweetheart. My shorts are a bit damp from all this excitement." He got up with a similar look of glee, and they walked quickly down the courtyard to their apartment. This time it was Dawn who looked back and said, "Thanks. Everyone, great story," before being pulled along by Lynn. "Now, where were we?" Chris asked, playfully trying to pull her back onto his lap. No public displays of affection. Besides, Kitty is feeling great, and she wants to try some fun new things on your comfy bed, Joe said playfully. Chris laughed. "Well, I hope Kitty isn't tired because we're wide awake over here," he teased back with a grin. Joe giggled. "Nope, Kitty's ready for some fun, let's go." Thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to Infidelity Plus to stay updated with more captivating tales of infidelity and payback. Turn on notifications so you're the first to see our latest content.